Myth and Memory. The Legend of Romulus and Remus. The legend of Romulus and Remus stands not just as a foundational myth of Rome, but as a mirror reflecting the ancient world's need to root identity in something greater than memory, a fusion of divine fate, heroic struggle, and the untamed forces of nature. According to the story passed down by poets, historians, and orators, Romulus and Remus were twin brothers born of a lineage both royal and divine, descendants of Aeneas of Troy, yet cast into a world that sought their destruction from the very beginning. Their tale does not merely offer a charming anecdote, it lays the ideological groundwork for Roman values: strength, sacrifice, and destiny. The origin of the twins begins with their mother, Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin and daughter of Numitor, the rightful king of Alba Longa. When her father was overthrown by his brother Amulius, she was forced into priestly service, her chastity sworn to prevent any descendants who might challenge the usurper. But fate intervened. It is said that the god Mars, drawn by her beauty or perhaps compelled by divine will, fathered the twins. In doing so, the line of Aeneas was not extinguished but reignited. Upon their birth, Amulius, fearing prophecy and vengeance, ordered them to be drowned in the Tiber River. Yet the river, swollen and wild, did not take their lives. Instead, it deposited them safely on the banks, where their cradle became caught in the roots of a fig tree, a symbol that would echo through Roman culture. Nature itself seemed to protect the boys. A she-wolf, an animal both feared and revered in Roman imagination, discovered the helpless infants. Rather than devour them, she suckled them, nourishing their bodies and perhaps imbuing them with a wild resilience. A woodpecker, sacred to Mars, is also said to have brought them food. Eventually, a shepherd named Faustulus found the twins and, along with his wife Acca Larentia, raised them as his own. They grew up among shepherds, unaware of their royal blood, but already marked by leadership and boldness. The wilderness of the Roman hills, the howling of wolves at night, and the trials of rural life honed them into formidable young men. As the brothers matured, they became natural leaders among the rural youth, standing out in strength and charisma. They frequently found themselves at odds with local authorities and soon discovered their true lineage. Fired by this revelation and driven by a sense of justice, they helped overthrow Amulius and restore Numitor to his rightful throne. Yet, their destiny was not to rule Alba Longa. A different purpose awaited them, one that would shape the future of the world. Romulus and Remus set out to found a new city near the place where the she-wolf had saved them. But even in myth, creation does not come without conflict. The twin brothers disagreed over the precise location of their city. Romulus favored the Palatine Hill, while Remus preferred the Aventine. To settle the matter, they turned to augury, the reading of omens in the flight of birds, a practice deeply woven into Roman religious life. Remus claimed to have seen 6 vultures first, but Romulus saw 12. The interpretation of the signs led to a deeper dispute, one inflamed by ambition and pride. What followed was tragic and symbolic. In the scuffle that ensued, Romulus killed Remus. Accounts vary. Some say Remus mocked Romulus by leaping over his wall, deriding its ability to protect the city. Others describe a more intense clash. Regardless of the version, the outcome was the same: fratricide. The blood of his own brother watered the foundations of Rome. This act, brutal and poignant, imbued the city with a powerful message that greatness sometimes demands sacrifice, even of those closest to us. The story of Romulus slaying Remus encapsulates a deeper Roman truth. Power is not inherited, it is seized and protected at all costs. Romulus became the first king of Rome, and under his rule, the city took shape. He opened its gates to outcasts, fugitives, and the dispossessed, creating a population diverse and unruly, but fiercely loyal. To ensure continuity and strength, Romulus orchestrated the infamous rape of the Sabine women, not a tale of romantic courtship, but a calculated act of survival. By abducting women from neighboring tribes during a festival, Rome forced political and familial bonds with the surrounding peoples. The move was brutal, yet it worked. War followed, but ultimately ended in a compromise. The Sabine women intervened, standing between their fathers and their new Roman husbands, calling for unity. It was a moment of reconciliation that blended conquest with diplomacy, violence with peace. Romulus's reign continued with military campaigns, administrative reforms, and the forging of Rome's earliest institutions. Yet his end was as mysterious as his beginning. Some say he vanished during a storm, taken up into the heavens by the gods. Others suggest he was murdered by the Senate, uneasy with his growing power. In any case, he was later deified and worshipped as Quirinus, a god of the Roman state. His mortal struggles were thus elevated to divine myth, his legacy preserved in both temples and hearts. The legend of Romulus and Remus endured not merely because it explained a city's beginning, but because it touched upon eternal themes: abandonment and rescue, rivalry and sacrifice, destiny and divinity. The she-wolf that nursed them became a symbol of Rome itself, fierce, nurturing, primal. Their tale served as a metaphor for the city's identity, born of struggle, forged in violence, and sustained by unyielding will. Roman historians like Livy and Plutarch grappled with the myth, often trying to reconcile its fantastical elements with historical reason. They did not reject the tale outright, rather they accepted its symbolic power. For the Romans, myth was never just fiction. It was a tool to transmit values, to inspire action, to justify rule. The story of Romulus and Remus was taught in schools, echoed in art, and retold in speeches, not because it was necessarily factual, but because it was foundational. Even centuries later, as the Roman Empire expanded across continents and absorbed countless cultures, the image of the she-wolf suckling the twins endured. It appeared on coins, statues, and public buildings. Foreign rulers who visited Rome beheld not only a city of stone, but one built upon stories. In an age where memory could be manipulated and history rewritten, the myth stood firm. It reminded Romans of who they were, where they came from, and what was expected of them. Modern scholars debate the origins of the legend. Some see echoes of Indo-European twin myths, recurring motifs of divine birth, sibling rivalry, and the founding of civilization. Others argue the tale was retrofitted to lend nobility and antiquity to a young Rome eager to rival Greece and Egypt. Archaeological evidence suggests Rome's early settlements predate the traditional founding date of 753 BCE, but the myth persists, not as an obstacle to truth, but as a truth of its own kind. In the end, the legend of Romulus and Remus survives not in spite of its contradictions, but because of them. It holds within it the paradoxes of Roman identity: order born from chaos, law rooted in bloodshed, civilization springing from wilderness. It is a myth where memory meets meaning, where Rome's origin is not just a point in time, but a story told again and again to remind the world that greatness has a price, and it often begins with a cradle abandoned on the riverbank. Latins, Sabines, and Etruscans. Rome before Rome. Long before the marble temples of the Roman Forum, or the legions that marched across Europe, the land that would become Rome was a mosaic of cultures, each adding its thread to the fabric of an emerging civilization. The Latins, Sabines, and Etruscans were among the earliest inhabitants of the Italian peninsula, and their interactions through conflict, alliance, and cultural exchange laid the foundations for what would eventually rise as the Roman Republic. These peoples, though distinct in language, tradition, and structure, shared a common destiny: to shape the identity of one of history's greatest empires. Their stories predate the mythic twins Romulus and Remus, whose legendary struggle for dominion reflects the deeper historical interplay among the tribes and cities that once dotted the hills and valleys of central Italy. The Latins were among the oldest known Italic peoples, inhabiting a region later known as Latium. This area, consisting of modest settlements nestled between the Tiber River and the Alban Hills, was home to small agricultural communities. They spoke an early form of Latin, and their society revolved around kinship and clan alliances. Unlike later Rome, the early Latin settlements were not heavily urbanized. Their towns were mostly composed of wooden huts and primitive fortifications, centered around sacred groves and basic communal centers. Despite their simplicity, the Latins demonstrated a keen ability to form federations for mutual defense and religious observance. One such federation, the Latin League, represented an early experiment in shared governance that foreshadowed Rome's later political structures. Their worship of deities like Jupiter, Mars, and Vesta reflected a deeply rooted spiritual consciousness, one that Rome would eventually adopt and elaborate upon. North of the Latins lay the Sabines, a rugged people who inhabited the mountainous region of the Apennines. They were known for their fierce independence, pastoral economy, and warrior spirit. The Sabines maintained a deeply patriarchal and religiously devout culture. Unlike the Latins, their society was more tribal and less urban, relying on a strict code of honor and loyalty to clan leaders. While the Sabines were often seen as warlike and insular, their interactions with neighboring tribes were not limited to conflict. Marriages, treaties, and occasional joint rituals bound them to other Italic peoples in complex networks of alliance. One of the most famous Sabine contributions to Roman lore is the tale of the Rape of the Sabine Women, a dramatic episode that, while likely mythologized, symbolized the merging of two distinct peoples into one community. The story is less about violence and more about political union, the idea that strength lies in integration rather than isolation. Further to the north, the Etruscans thrived in a region the Romans would later call Etruria. The Etruscans were markedly different from their Latin and Sabine neighbors. They were more urbanized, technologically advanced, and artistically expressive. The origins of the Etruscans remain debated, with theories suggesting they descended either from indigenous Italian peoples or migrants from Anatolia. What is clear, however, is their immense influence on the early development of Rome. Etruscan cities like Veii, Tarquinia, and Clusium were centers of wealth, trade, and innovation. They developed a sophisticated writing system, advanced metallurgy, and intricate religious rituals. Their burial practices, with elaborate tombs and afterlife beliefs, indicate a complex spiritual worldview. Etruscan priests, or haruspices, practiced divination through the study of animal entrails and lightning patterns, an art that the Romans would later integrate into their own religious life. The relationship between these three groups was not always peaceful. Territorial disputes and battles punctuated their histories. Yet, amid the strife, there was also exchange, cultural, linguistic, and technological. The Latins borrowed architectural and religious ideas from the Etruscans, while the Sabines contributed to the martial and moral ethos that would characterize Roman identity. It is important to understand that early Rome was not built in a vacuum. The city that would dominate the Mediterranean began as a syncretic experiment, shaped by those who came before and lived beside it. Archaeological findings support this intertwined development. Excavations on the Palatine and Capitoline hills reveal a mix of Latin, Sabine, and Etruscan influences in early Roman artifacts and burial practices. Etruscan-style tombs have been discovered within what would become Roman territory, while Latin pottery styles appear in areas traditionally attributed to Sabine settlement. Such evidence points to a region in flux, where borders were porous and cultural identity was constantly negotiated. This fluidity allowed for a dynamic exchange of ideas that would later make Rome uniquely adaptable and resilient. Etruscan kings are believed to have ruled over early Rome before the establishment of the Republic. Figures like Tarquinius Priscus and Tarquinius Superbus are traditionally listed among Rome's early monarchs. These rulers introduced many elements of Etruscan governance, including the fasces, a bundle of rods symbolizing authority, and elements of urban planning, such as drainage systems and monumental architecture. Even the iconic Roman toga may have originated from Etruscan ceremonial garments. While the eventual overthrow of the monarchy marked a turning point in Roman political history, it did not sever the cultural threads woven during those formative years. The role of women in these societies also differed and impacted Roman customs. Etruscan women, for example, enjoyed significantly more autonomy and public presence than their Latin or Sabine counterparts. They dined with men, owned property, and were commemorated in inscriptions. This visibility may have subtly influenced Roman family law and gender roles, though later Roman society would grow increasingly patriarchal. Meanwhile, Sabine and Latin women played crucial roles in domestic religious practices and were revered as keepers of family honor and tradition. Religious syncretism was perhaps one of the most lasting legacies of these early interactions. The Romans inherited a pantheon that bore traces of all three groups. Jupiter retained his Latin roots, but rituals surrounding him reflected Etruscan formalism. The Vestal Virgins, guardians of the sacred flame, may have derived from an ancient Latin Sabine tradition. The practice of augury, interpreting the will of the gods through the flight of birds, was refined under Etruscan influence but rooted in older Italic customs. This blending of beliefs gave Roman religion a unique flexibility and authority, allowing it to serve both civic and spiritual purposes. Language, too, evolved through contact. While Latin would become the dominant tongue of the Roman world, it did not arise in isolation. Words of Etruscan and Sabine origin entered the Latin vocabulary, especially in domains related to religion, architecture, and governance. The word persona, for instance, has theatrical and religious connotations believed to stem from Etruscan ritual masks. Even the names of early Roman families, such as the Claudii and Valerii, reflect a blend of tribal origins and adapted identities. Economically, the Etruscans provided Rome with access to broader trade networks. Their maritime prowess connected central Italy with the wider Mediterranean world. Goods from Greece, Phoenicia, and Egypt made their way into Etruscan markets, where Latin and Sabine artisans and traders could observe and adopt new styles and techniques. This exposure laid the groundwork for Rome's eventual commercial ambition, as the city developed not only military might but economic reach. The construction of early Rome also tells a tale of synthesis. The Romans learned urban engineering from the Etruscans, particularly the use of the arch, sewer systems like the Cloaca Maxima, and fortified walls. From the Sabines came a reverence for law, tradition, and disciplined behavior, values that would underpin the Roman legal code and social expectations. The Latins contributed language, early political assemblies, and agricultural expertise. Together, these elements became the bedrock of a society that could absorb new influences without losing cohesion. As the city of Rome began to coalesce on the banks of the Tiber, it became a reflection of all these currents. The Forum, initially a simple marketplace and gathering spot, became the heart of a new civic life, a space where old customs were transformed into new institutions. The blending of Latin simplicity, Sabine honor, and Etruscan grandeur created a political culture both practical and aspirational. Rome was not simply born, it was forged over centuries of interaction among peoples who learned to coexist, compete, and eventually cooperate. In time, Rome's narrative would claim divine origins and heroic founders, but its true genesis lies in this early convergence of tribes and traditions. The unity of the Latins, the strength of the Sabines, and the wisdom of the Etruscans provided the DNA of a civilization that would endure for over a millennium. Their legacy, embedded in the stones of temples and the words of laws, lives on as a testament to the power of cultural fusion. Before there was an empire, before there was even a city, there was a land of hills and rivers, shaped by those who dared to dream beyond their valleys and dared to build together. Kings of Rome. The Regal period and its legacy. The Regal period of Rome, which spanned from its legendary founding in 753 BCE to the establishment of the Roman Republic in 509 BCE, holds a critical yet often mythologized place in the history of one of the most influential civilizations of the ancient world. This period is traditionally said to be ruled by 7 kings, each contributing uniquely to the foundational character and structure of the Roman state. While the factual accuracy of the events during the Regal period is open to interpretation, the stories of these kings have had a profound influence on the development of Roman political and cultural identity. According to ancient accounts, the founding of Rome itself is steeped in myth, with the tale of Romulus and Remus, the twin brothers who were raised by a she-wolf and eventually founded the city, standing as the iconic origin story. Romulus, the first king, is credited with establishing many of Rome's earliest institutions. His reign was characterized by a mixture of militaristic expansion and social development. Romulus' actions were instrumental in shaping the identity of the city and its people, setting precedents for the kinds of leadership that would define the monarchy. Following Romulus, a succession of kings continued to shape Rome. Numa Pompilius, the second king, was known for his peaceful and religious nature. He is said to have established the Roman calendar and numerous religious rituals that would become central to Roman life. Numa's reign marked a period of consolidation and internal development, with a strong emphasis on creating a structured and harmonious society. His contributions are often viewed as crucial in transforming Rome from a city of warriors into a more sophisticated and orderly community, establishing religious foundations that would persist throughout Roman history. Next came Tullus Hostilius, a king whose reign was marked by a return to militarism. Tullus is best known for his military campaigns, most notably the destruction of the city of Alba Longa, a rival settlement in central Italy. Under his leadership, Rome expanded its influence and territory through conquest and strategic alliances. The focus on warfare and territorial expansion under Tullus would set the tone for Rome's aggressive expansionism in subsequent centuries. His reign was not without challenges, however, as his disregard for religious traditions led to his eventual downfall, suggesting that even in early Rome, the intertwining of politics and religion was deeply ingrained in governance. Ancus Marcius, the fourth king, is often seen as a more balanced ruler, continuing both the military campaigns of Tullus Hostilius and the religious reforms of Numa Pompilius. He is credited with expanding Rome's territory even further, founding the port city of Ostia to secure Roman trade routes. Ancus' reign represents a transition between the martial kingship of Tullus and the more complex, civic-minded approach of his successors. His policies laid the groundwork for the growth of Rome as a major economic and military power. The fifth king, Tarquinius Priscus, hailed from the Etruscan city of Tarquinii, and his reign saw a distinct shift in Rome's political and architectural development. Tarquin's reign was marked by the construction of the Circus Maximus and the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer that still serves Rome today. His reign is often viewed as one of significant infrastructural advancement, and his ability to gain power, despite his Etruscan background, demonstrated the increasing importance of military strength, strategic alliances, and political savvy. His reign was also marked by a struggle for power, which eventually led to his assassination, an event that would further shape the notion of power struggles within Rome's ruling elite. Following Tarquin's assassination, his son, Servius Tullius, became king. Servius is remembered for introducing significant social and political reforms, most notably the Servian constitution, which reorganized Roman society into classes based on wealth and military capability. His reforms had a lasting effect on the structure of Roman society, as they laid the groundwork for the later republican system, where citizens' rights and obligations were often determined by their economic status. Servius's reign also saw the expansion of Rome's territory through conquest, but his greatest legacy was in the transformation of Rome's political landscape. The final king, Tarquinius Superbus, is often remembered as a tyrant whose reign ended with the expulsion of the monarchy and the establishment of the Roman Republic. His rule marked the height of Roman monarchy, but also sowed the seeds of its downfall. Tarquin's arrogance, cruelty, and disregard for the Senate's authority led to widespread dissatisfaction among the Roman aristocracy and common citizens alike. His son's actions, particularly the infamous assault on Lucretia, triggered the rebellion that overthrew the monarchy and led to the founding of the Republic. Tarquinius's expulsion symbolized the end of the monarchy and the beginning of a new era in Rome's political history. The legacy of the Regal period is vast and enduring. Even though the monarchy itself was overthrown, the influence of the kings can be seen in many aspects of Roman life. The structure of Roman society, the importance of military prowess, and the belief in divine favor for their rulers were all elements that would continue to shape Rome for centuries. The religious rituals, architectural wonders, and social structures initiated by the kings were carried forward into the Republic and the Empire, and in many ways, these early kings laid the foundation for the political and cultural achievements of ancient Rome. Moreover, the stories of these kings, whether entirely factual or shaped by legend, became central to the Roman identity. The Regal period was seen as a time when Rome was forged from the myths and actions of these early rulers, and the principles established during their reigns became foundational to Roman thought. The transition from monarchy to republic marked a profound change in Rome's political system, but the echoes of the Regal period continued to influence the republic's structure, particularly in the realms of religious observances, military organization, and the importance of civic duty. In examining the Regal period and its kings, it becomes clear that these early rulers not only shaped Rome's immediate political and military trajectory, but also left a legacy that continued to inform the culture, values, and governance of the Roman people. From Romulus's legendary founding of the city to the expulsion of Tarquin Superbus, the Regal period laid the groundwork for the evolution of one of the greatest civilizations in history. Whether through the establishment of religious practices, the expansion of territory, or the eventual transformation into a republic, the kings of Rome had an indelible impact on the story of the Eternal City. Their legacy persists in the ways we understand Roman civilization, even if the exact details of their reigns are lost to time. The regal period of Rome, although often overshadowed by the more well-documented era of the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire, laid down the initial frameworks upon which the future Roman state would be built. Much of the period's historical accounts are obscured by legend and myth, with many details coming to us through the works of later historians such as Livy and Plutarch, who shaped the narrative of the early kings to reflect the values and ideals of their time. Still, these ancient records provide invaluable insight into the transformative nature of Rome's first centuries. A pivotal feature of the regal period was the integration of Rome into a broader regional geopolitical structure. Early Roman kings, such as Numa Pompilius, not only focused on strengthening the internal structures of Rome, but also on positioning the city-state within the surrounding Latin and Etruscan cultures. Rome, situated between powerful civilizations like the Etruscans to the north and the Greek colonies to the south, was a relatively small and emerging power. During the reign of Romulus, the city was primarily concerned with its own survival and growth, but as the monarchy progressed, the kings of Rome began to take a broader view of their relationships with neighboring peoples and states. The expansion of Rome's influence under the kings, especially through strategic alliances, was key to its future success. Initially, Rome was surrounded by various Latin tribes, each with its own customs and power structures. However, the need for military allies and diplomatic partnerships led to the formation of the Latin League, a loose confederation of neighboring tribes that worked together for mutual defense. The importance of this early political maneuver cannot be understated, as it laid the groundwork for the extensive network of alliances that would characterize the Roman Republic. In terms of social development, the regal period is also remembered for its major contributions to the Roman legal and political systems. While Numa Pompilius is credited with establishing Rome's religious practices and calendar, other kings like Servius Tullius began to reshape the societal structure of Rome. Tullius implemented significant reforms that defined Roman society for centuries, the most notable being the organization of Roman citizens into classes based on wealth and military capability. This reorganization, which came to be known as the Servian Constitution, created a clear distinction between different social and economic classes and gave rise to the notion of civic duty that would be central to Roman identity in the centuries to come. The Servian reforms were not only administrative, but also symbolic, reinforcing the idea that a Roman citizen's rights and responsibilities were directly tied to his property and military service. By grouping citizens into a series of centuries based on their wealth, Servius essentially institutionalized the military service of the Roman people, ensuring that the state had a capable and organized fighting force. This shift in the social order would be a hallmark of Roman life for generations, and it made the Romans a highly disciplined and cohesive society, ready to defend their land and expand their influence. While Servius Tullius sought to create a more balanced and structured society, the reign of his successor, Tarquinius Superbus, represented the opposite extreme. Tarquin's rule, which ended with his expulsion in 509 BCE, was characterized by increasing tyranny and disregard for the traditional power structures of Rome. His reign is seen by many as the culmination of the excesses of monarchy, a reign that led to political unrest and eventually sparked the revolution that abolished the monarchy and founded the Roman Republic. The expulsion of Tarquin marked the end of the regal period, but also laid the foundation for the Roman Republic. The aristocratic class, particularly the patricians, played a key role in the overthrow of Tarquin, arguing that the monarchy had become too oppressive and that it was time for a new political system based on shared power and checks and balances. The subsequent establishment of the Republic was not a complete break from the past. Rather, it can be seen as an evolution of the values that had been developed during the regal period. such as civic duty, military service, and the central role of religion in governance. The legacy of the regal period also extends to the development of Roman religion and culture. The Roman kings, especially Numa, played an essential role in the establishment of religious institutions that would last throughout Roman history. The kings, acting as both political and religious leaders, ensured that the gods were properly appeased and that the moral order of the universe was maintained. These religious practices were not simply about ritual, but were deeply intertwined with the governance of Rome. Kings like Numa sought to create a balance between the power of the monarchy and the divine favor necessary for maintaining the city's prosperity. Over time, this concept of the divine right of kings became a central aspect of Roman political culture, with future leaders often claiming that their power was granted by the gods. Furthermore, the regal period set the stage for the development of Roman law and governance. While the exact legal structures of the early kings are hard to reconstruct, the groundwork for future Roman law can be seen in the practices and customs of the regal period. Early kings such as Romulus and Numa were instrumental in establishing legal precedents that would later be codified in the 12 Tables, one of the first written legal codes in Roman history. These early legal systems provided a foundation for the eventual development of Roman jurisprudence, which would become one of Rome's most enduring contributions to Western civilization. Another significant aspect of the regal period was the role of the military in the formation of the Roman state. Rome's early kings were not just rulers but military leaders, and their success was often determined by their ability to expand and defend the city-state. Early kings like Romulus and Tullus Hostilius are remembered for their military prowess, and their campaigns were instrumental in securing Rome's early borders and laying the foundation for future territorial expansion. The military, in turn, played a critical role in the development of Roman society, both in terms of military discipline and in the way that Rome's military victories were celebrated and immortalized in art, literature, and religious observances. The regal period also provides a window into the transition from tribalism to a more structured society. During the early years of Rome, the city was divided into a number of clans, or gentes, each with its own leadership and customs. As the monarchy progressed, however, the kings began to consolidate power and centralize authority, reducing the influence of the clans and laying the groundwork for a more unified and hierarchical society. This shift would have far-reaching consequences for the political structure of Rome, as it would eventually lead to the rise of the Senate and the dominance of the patrician class. In conclusion, the regal period of Rome, while often viewed through the lens of myth and legend, was a critical phase in the development of Roman civilization. The contributions of the kings, particularly in the areas of law, religion, military organization, and social structure, had a profound and lasting impact on the future of Rome. Even though the monarchy was eventually overthrown, the legacy of the regal period lived on in the principles and institutions that the kings had established. From the creation of religious rites and legal systems to the formation of a strong and disciplined military, the regal period set the stage for the rise of the Roman Republic and ultimately the Roman Empire. The Etruscan influence on Roman culture and politics. The Etruscans were one of the most influential civilizations of ancient Italy, and their impact on Rome is often understated in popular history. Although their presence in Italy predates the rise of Rome, their cultural, political, and religious contributions played a pivotal role in shaping the early Roman Republic and its institutions. Their influence is evident in many facets of Roman life, from art and architecture to religious practices and governance. The Etruscans inhabited central Italy, particularly the region known as Etruria, which was roughly equivalent to present-day Tuscany. By the 8th century BCE, they had established a thriving society with significant trading links with the Greeks and Phoenicians. Their culture was distinct, yet shared many features with their neighbors. While their language remains largely undeciphered, much about their civilization is known through archaeological evidence and Roman accounts. It is from the early contact between the Etruscans and the Romans that much of the Roman identity began to take shape. The political structure of the Etruscan cities was highly influential in the formation of Roman political institutions. The Etruscans had a system of kingship, and it was from this model that the Romans adopted certain aspects of their own governmental structure. The Roman kings, particularly during the monarchy period before the Republic was established in 509 BCE, bore many similarities to their Etruscan counterparts. This influence can be seen most clearly in the Roman adoption of monarchy-like leadership, where kings played central roles in both military and civic affairs. The early Roman kings, including Romulus, the mythical founder of Rome, were often depicted as powerful rulers with supreme authority, much like their Etruscan predecessors. In terms of governance, the Romans incorporated many aspects of the Etruscan system. For instance, the idea of a powerful king who wielded both religious and political power was adopted from the Etruscans. While Rome eventually transitioned from monarchy to a republic, the vestiges of Etruscan monarchical power remained embedded in Roman society. Roman consuls who held executive power were often elected for one-year terms, but their authority, particularly in the military and religious spheres, mirrored the Etruscan kings. Even the concept of a senate, which would become a cornerstone of Roman political life, was inspired by the Etruscan councils of elders that advised the kings. Another area where the Etruscan influence on Rome is palpable is in their religious practices. The Romans borrowed much from the Etruscans in terms of religious rituals, especially their methods of divination. The practice of haruspicy, which involved interpreting the entrails of sacrificed animals, was a distinct Etruscan religious practice that found its way into Roman religious life. The Roman augurs, who interpreted the will of the gods through the observation of omens, such as the flight patterns of birds, also had their origins in Etruscan practices. The Romans, who were highly religious and believed that divine favor was crucial for success, looked to these divinatory practices to guide their decisions. This form of ritual was essential for ensuring that Rome's leaders acted in accordance with the will of the gods, a principle that the Etruscans had deeply ingrained in their culture. Etruscan religion also introduced a number of deities to the Roman pantheon. Gods such as Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva, who would later become central figures in Roman religion, were derived from the Etruscan deities. The Etruscans had a well-developed religious system that influenced the Roman understanding of divine power and ritual. Their belief in the importance of augury and their pantheon of gods was absorbed by the Romans and reshaped into what would become the official Roman religious system. The Etruscans also had an influence on the Roman practice of religious festivals, which were celebrated with grand processions, sacrifices, and games. In terms of military affairs, the Etruscans were known for their highly disciplined and professional armies, which provided a model for Roman military organization. The Roman army, often regarded as one of the greatest military forces in history, was influenced by Etruscan military innovations. The organization of Roman legions, their use of cavalry, and their emphasis on discipline and training can be traced back to the Etruscans. The Etruscans were also known for their use of heavy armor, and their equipment was adopted by the Romans, influencing the development of the Roman legionaries' iconic armor and weaponry. Furthermore, the Etruscan focus on fortification and the building of defensive structures influenced Roman military architecture, particularly the construction of walls and fortresses designed to protect cities from invasion. The Etruscans were also influential in the realm of art and architecture. Their mastery of metalworking, particularly in bronze, was highly admired by the Romans. Etruscan bronze mirrors, vessels, and sculptures were highly prized by the Romans and became a symbol of luxury and status. The Etruscans were also known for their tombs, which were elaborately decorated and often contained detailed frescoes depicting the afterlife. These artistic techniques and designs were later adopted by the Romans, influencing the decoration of Roman tombs and public buildings. The Etruscans' use of arches in architecture, and particularly in the construction of bridges and gateways, was another important contribution to Roman engineering. The arch would later become a fundamental feature of Roman architecture, particularly in the construction of aqueducts, amphitheaters, and other monumental structures. The Etruscans were also responsible for introducing the practice of gladiatorial combat to the Romans. The first recorded gladiatorial games in Rome were held in the early 3rd century BCE, but the tradition of fighting for entertainment can be traced back to Etruscan funerary practices. The Etruscans believed that such combat honored the dead and was a way to display bravery and prowess. The Romans would later adopt and expand upon this practice, turning gladiatorial combat into one of the most iconic and brutal spectacles in Roman culture. Despite their significant influence on Roman culture, the Etruscans eventually fell to the growing power of Rome. By the 4th century BCE, Rome had conquered much of Etruria, and the Etruscan cities were absorbed into the Roman Republic. However, even after the Etruscan political power had faded, their cultural legacy continued to shape Roman society. Many Roman elites trace their ancestry to Etruscan aristocracy, and their influence can be seen in Roman art, religion, military tactics, and politics long after the fall of the Etruscan civilization. The Etruscan influence on Rome was crucial in the early stages of Roman development. The political, religious, and cultural innovations of the Etruscans laid the groundwork for the rise of Rome as a dominant power in the Mediterranean world. While the Etruscans may have faded from history, their contributions to Roman civilization were vital in shaping the Roman identity. The legacy of the Etruscans endures in the institutions, art, architecture, and military practices of ancient Rome, and through Rome, their influence spread throughout the Western world. Roman religion and the sacred origins of the city. Roman religion was intricately woven into the fabric of daily life and was foundational to the rise of the city of Rome. Unlike the abstract spiritual practices of later Christianity, Roman religion was practical and communal, deeply embedded in the city's laws, military structure, and societal expectations. From its earliest days, the Romans saw religion not as a mere philosophical pursuit, but as a system that maintained harmony and ensured the prosperity of the state. At the heart of Roman religion was the belief that the gods were actively involved in every aspect of life, from the smallest domestic affairs to the grandest political events. The Roman state was considered to have a special relationship with the gods, one that ensured Rome's rise to greatness. The gods were seen not just as ethereal beings, but as powerful forces whose favor was critical to the city's survival. Rituals, sacrifices, and prayers were all designed to keep the gods appeased, to avoid divine wrath, and to maintain order in the world. The sacred origins of Rome are famously rooted in myth. According to Roman tradition, the city was founded by Romulus and Remus, twin brothers who were the sons of Mars, the god of war, and Rhea Silvia, a Vestal virgin. The twins were abandoned by their mother and raised by a she-wolf in the wilds of the Palatine Hill. This legendary tale symbolized Rome's connection to both divine favor and the harsh, survival-driven qualities that characterized the city's rise. Mars, as their father, imprinted upon them a warrior's strength and a fierce sense of destiny, both of which would shape Rome's future. The city itself was seen as the physical embodiment of the gods' will on earth. Romulus, the first king of Rome, is said to have consecrated the city with a sacred ritual, establishing the boundaries of the city through a plow that drew a furrow around the Palatine Hill. This act was not only symbolic, but was believed to invoke divine protection over the city and its people. The boundary, or pomerium, was more than a physical demarcation. It was a sacred line that separated the sacred from the mundane. Crossing this boundary was an act of spiritual significance and represented a shift in one's relationship with the gods. The Roman religion was marked by a polytheistic belief system, where gods and goddesses were not confined to abstract roles, but were deeply integrated into the state's infrastructure. Key deities like Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva were worshipped in public ceremonies and festivals, while the more personal gods and spirits of the home, like the Lares and Penates, watched over the individual household. This duality, gods both public and private, reflected the Roman worldview that the sacred and the secular were not separate, but were two sides of the same coin. One of the most significant aspects of Roman religion was the role of augurs and priests, who interpreted the will of the gods through signs and omens. These individuals were responsible for ensuring that Rome's actions, whether in war or diplomacy, were in accordance with divine will. The augurs, for instance, would interpret the flight patterns of birds to determine whether a particular endeavor was favored by the gods. Such religious observances were not mere rituals. They were seen as essential to the success of the Roman state. It was believed that divine will had to be consulted at every step, from declaring war to deciding where to build a temple. The concept of divine favor extended to the early history of Rome's military campaigns. Victories in battle were often seen as the result of the gods' favor, while defeats were interpreted as signs of divine displeasure. Triumphs, which were grand victory parades through the streets of Rome, were deeply religious in nature. The victorious general would offer sacrifices to the gods, thanking them for their support and ensuring that their favor continued. The general's triumph was not just a personal celebration, but a collective religious act that reaffirmed the city's bond with the divine. The importance of religion in early Rome was also reflected in its political institutions. Roman magistrates, such as consuls and praetors, were not just political leaders. They were also religious figures, responsible for performing sacred duties. The highest officials of the state were expected to consult the gods before making important decisions, reinforcing the idea that Rome's authority was divinely ordained. Even the Senate, the governing body of Rome, conducted official rituals to maintain the gods' favor, particularly when it came to matters of war and peace. In addition to these public ceremonies, the Romans placed great emphasis on personal piety. Every Roman, from the wealthiest patricians to the humblest plebeians, was expected to engage in religious practices, whether by offering sacrifices at family shrines or participating in communal festivals. Religious observances were not just for the elite, but were seen as a necessary part of Roman identity. Even in times of political upheaval or social unrest, the continuity of religious rites was viewed as a stabilizing force that ensured Rome's endurance. The idea that the survival of the city depended on maintaining the favor of the gods was a constant theme in Roman thought. One of the most significant religious structures in early Rome was the Temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus, located on the Capitoline Hill. This temple, dedicated to Jupiter, the king of the gods, was the site of the most important state sacrifices and rituals. The Temple of Jupiter was symbolic of Rome's close relationship with the divine, and its religious importance transcended its architectural grandeur. As Rome expanded and conquered new territories, the Temple of Jupiter became a focal point for imperial authority and divine right. The Roman religious calendar was filled with festivals and ceremonies that marked the passage of time and the changing seasons. Some of these festivals honored particular deities, while others celebrated significant events in Rome's history. The most important of these festivals was the Roman Triumph, which celebrated military victories, as well as the Perilia, a festival of purification and renewal, which was linked to the founding of the city. These celebrations were not just public spectacles, but were integral to the community's sense of identity and unity. The intertwining of religion and politics in ancient Rome helped foster a sense of duty, devotion, and continuity within the Roman populace. The idea that the city's survival and prosperity depended on religious observance led to a deep commitment to the gods and the rituals that upheld Roman identity. As Rome expanded its reach across the Mediterranean world, its religious practices evolved, but the core belief that the city's fate was closely tied to divine favor remained unchanged. In conclusion, Roman religion played a central role in the development of Rome as a city and as a global empire. The sacred origins of Rome, rooted in myth and ritual, provided the foundation for its political and social structures. The gods, both public and private, were seen as active participants in the city's destiny, ensuring that Rome would continue to grow and thrive as long as the proper respect and reverence were paid. This deep connection to the divine, through both public rituals and personal devotion, was essential in shaping the character of the Roman people and the city they built. Foundation myths as political tools. Foundation myths have long been essential tools in the construction and legitimation of political power across various societies. These myths, often recounted in epic narratives, provide societies with shared origins and values, linking the present to an idealized past. As political instruments, they shape public identity, bolster the authority of ruling elites, and offer a means to legitimize actions and policies. The most influential foundation myths often emerge during times of political or social transition, offering a framework within which new regimes or power structures can be understood and justified. A foundation myth is a traditional story that explains the origins of a group, civilization, or political entity. These myths often serve to legitimize the rise of a new power, offering a divine or heroic precedent for its existence. They provide moral authority and historical depth, framing political systems as the natural and ordained continuation of a long-established lineage. By connecting the present political structure to a legendary or divine origin, these myths foster unity and collective identity among the people. One of the most enduring examples of a foundation myth is the Roman myth of Romulus and Remus. According to the myth, the twin brothers were the sons of the god Mars and the Vestal Virgin Rhea Silvia, abandoned on the banks of the Tiber River, only to be raised by a she-wolf. They grew up to become legendary figures, eventually founding the city of Rome. The myth not only established the divine origins of Rome, but also reinforced its martial virtues, with Romulus becoming the first king of Rome and setting the city on a path of conquest and dominance. For the Romans, this myth was more than just a story. It was a tool used by political leaders to justify the city's imperial ambitions and divine right to rule. In addition to Rome, other ancient civilizations used foundation myths to bolster their political legitimacy. The Greeks, for instance, believed their city-states were divinely protected and often traced their origins to gods or heroes. Athens, the intellectual and cultural heart of ancient Greece, claimed to have been founded by the goddess Athena, while the city's political structure and legal codes were attributed to the wisdom of legendary figures like Solon. The myth of Athena's gift of the olive tree to the Athenians served not only to explain the city's prosperity, but also to reinforce the idea of divine favor and the righteousness of the Athenian political order. Athens used this myth to bolster its identity as the cradle of democracy, offering a divine precedent for its unique political system. Similarly, the foundation myths of Egypt played a crucial role in the legitimation of its pharaohs. The myth of Osiris, the god of the afterlife, and his resurrection after being murdered by his brother Seth provided a divine model for the pharaoh's power. The pharaoh was not only seen as a ruler, but also as the living god of Egypt, a figure who could mediate between the gods and the people. The idea of divine kingship was reinforced through these myths, with the pharaoh's authority being seen as a continuation of the divine order. The Egyptians believed that their civilization had been divinely ordained, and that the pharaoh's reign was essential for maintaining Ma'at, or cosmic order. Through the story of Osiris, the people were reminded that the political stability of Egypt was not only necessary for the prosperity of the land, but was also in harmony with the will of the gods. In more recent history, the use of foundation myths as political tools has continued, though the myths have often been adapted to serve modern political agendas. For example, the American myth of the founding of the United States centers on the idea of a nation born out of revolution and the pursuit of liberty. The story of the American Revolution, the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and the establishment of a republic are presented as the fulfillment of a divine destiny to create a land of freedom and opportunity. The founding fathers, such as George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, are often depicted as heroes who were guided by a higher moral purpose, shaping the nation in accordance with divine principles. However, this myth is not without its contradictions. The foundational ideals of freedom and equality were, at least in the early years, limited by the realities of slavery and the exclusion of women and Native Americans from the political process. The American Foundation myth, while elevating the ideals of democracy and self-government, often overlooks the realities of exclusion and oppression. Yet, over time, these foundational ideals have been used to challenge injustices, invoking the myth to demand equality and civil rights for all citizens. In this way, the foundation myth of the United States continues to serve both as a justification for the current political system and as a tool for political mobilization in the fight for greater social justice. In many ways, the political utility of foundation myths lies in their ability to transcend the details of history, focusing instead on broader, often symbolic narratives that reflect collective values and ideals. Whether rooted in divine right, heroic deeds, or the pursuit of liberty, These myths serve as a framework through which individuals and communities understand their place in the world. They provide a narrative that helps explain why a political system exists, what it represents, and why it should be upheld. However, foundation myths can also be used to maintain power by reinforcing the dominance of a particular group or ideology. For example, in medieval Europe, the Catholic Church played a significant role in shaping foundation myths. The Church's establishment of itself as the divinely ordained authority in Europe was essential for its political control. The myth of Christianity's spread through the actions of the apostles and early saints served to legitimize the power of the Church, as well as the concept of papal authority. By portraying the Church as the divinely sanctioned heir to the apostles, the papacy was able to assert its control over the political and spiritual life of Europe. The myth of divine kingship also played a prominent role in European monarchies. Kings and queens were often portrayed as God's chosen rulers, with their authority deriving not from the will of the people, but from divine right. In England, the myth of the divine right of kings became central to political life, with monarchs claiming that their authority was granted directly by God. This divine sanction was used to justify the monarchy's absolute power and to resist any attempts to limit royal authority. It was a political tool that maintained the monarchy's supremacy, particularly in times of political unrest, when the legitimacy of the monarchy might otherwise be questioned. In the modern era, the use of foundation myths has taken on new forms, particularly in the context of nationalism. Nationalist movements often create their own foundation myths to foster unity and rally support for the nation-state. These myths typically focus on the heroic actions of national founders, the struggle for independence, or the conquest of land. For instance, the myth of the founding of Israel centers on the return of the Jewish people to their ancestral homeland and their triumph over adversity. This myth has been used to legitimize the establishment of the State of Israel and to justify its ongoing political struggles. Similarly, the myth of the American Revolution has been reinterpreted by various political movements in the United States. The original myth of liberty and democracy has been employed by civil rights movements, feminist groups, and others seeking to extend the promise of equality to marginalized groups. These reinterpretations show that foundation myths are not fixed, but can be reshaped to fit contemporary political needs. In some cases, foundation myths are used to suppress alternative narratives or to erase the histories of marginalized groups. Colonial powers, for instance, often constructed foundation myths that justified their domination over indigenous peoples. The myth of the civilizing mission became a powerful tool for European imperialism, portraying colonizers as bringers of progress and enlightenment to savage lands. These myths helped to rationalize exploitation, displacement, and violence while simultaneously reinforcing the superiority of the colonizing powers. Ultimately, foundation myths are not just stories of the past, they are powerful political tools that shape the present. Whether used to justify political authority, foster unity, or legitimize social orders, these myths create a sense of continuity between past and present. They provide a narrative framework that helps societies make sense of their origins, purpose, and place in the world. In this way, foundation myths remain vital to the maintenance and transformation of political systems, offering a source of legitimacy and a means of political cohesion across time. Through the power of narrative, foundation myths continue to shape the ways in which people understand their political realities, providing a means of interpretation that resonates deeply with collective identity and memory. These myths, though often rooted in mythological or legendary elements, possess a profound political significance, offering societies the means to justify, challenge, or transform their political orders. Whether ancient or modern, the foundation myths of civilizations remain a critical component of political thought and action. The political utility of foundation myths can be observed in their ability to shape not only the perceptions of power, but also the ideological direction of entire societies. These myths often emerge during times of great change or uncertainty, serving as stabilizing forces in periods of political upheaval or social disruption. For emerging nations, the foundation myth provides a rallying point, offering a sense of identity and unity that transcends present challenges. The myth allows new political structures to be viewed not as temporary constructs, but as the fulfillment of a deeper, often divine destiny. Consider the role of foundation myths in the creation of the modern state. Nationalism, a political ideology that emerged in the 19th century, relies heavily on the construction and dissemination of foundation myths. These myths help to forge a collective identity by intertwining the historical narrative with national pride and purpose. National foundation myths are particularly effective in building an emotional connection between the people and the nation state, using shared symbols, heroes, and events as the bedrock for loyalty and unity. A striking example of how foundation myths serve the purposes of nationalism can be found in the creation of the modern Greek state. After centuries of Ottoman rule, Greece achieved independence in the early 19th century. The myth of the ancient Greek heroes, such as the figures of Leonidas and the Spartans at Thermopylae, became a critical component of the emerging Greek national identity. These myths were carefully crafted by intellectuals and politicians to evoke the glory of ancient Greece, tying the independence movement to a vision of restoring past greatness. The political elites in Greece, therefore, utilized the foundation myth not only as a cultural touchstone, but also as a tool to unite a fractured nation and promote its legitimacy on the world stage. This national myth helped Greeks to see their struggle for independence as the latest chapter in an epic story of heroism, valor, and resilience. Similarly, the foundation myth of the United States, which celebrates the struggle for independence from Great Britain, plays an essential role in fostering national unity. The myth of the American Revolution, with its portrayal of righteous colonists fighting for freedom, has been instrumental in the creation of a national identity. The events of the Revolution, the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and the formation of a democratic government are portrayed as an almost divine mission, set in motion by the Founding Fathers and fueled by higher moral principles. These myths transcend the realities of early American society, including the institution of slavery and the systemic marginalization of indigenous peoples, by emphasizing the principles of liberty, equality, and justice. For generations, this foundation myth has served as the backdrop against which Americans measure their political ideals, fostering a sense of shared purpose and destiny. Moreover, foundation myths in colonial contexts have been used to establish the legitimacy of new political entities. Colonial powers often created myths that justified their presence in foreign lands, portraying their rule as a civilizing mission. The British Empire, for example, used the myth of the white man's burden to justify imperial expansion. This foundation myth suggested that the British were bringing civilization, progress, and enlightenment to backward, uncivilized societies. By portraying colonized peoples as incapable of governing themselves, the myth served to legitimize the exploitation and domination of vast regions across Africa, Asia, and the Americas. It cast the British Empire as a benevolent force, acting in the name of a higher moral order, while masking the brutal realities of colonial oppression. This myth not only bolstered the power of the empire, but also allowed colonizers to maintain control by framing their presence as both necessary and virtuous. The strength of such myths is not confined to the past. In contemporary political life, the continued use of foundation myths can be seen in the way nations craft their identities in the face of modern challenges. Countries in the post-colonial world, for example, have often adopted their own foundation myths to counteract the colonial narratives that once defined them. In India, the myth of the struggle for independence, led by figures like Mahatma Gandhi, has been a key element in the construction of national identity. The myth of nonviolent resistance, the triumph of the Indian people over British imperialism, and the moral authority of Gandhi's leadership form the foundation of modern Indian nationalism. These stories are told and retold in political speeches, national celebrations, and textbooks, reinforcing a sense of unity and national pride. This foundation myth becomes a tool for not only looking back at a defining moment of independence, but also for promoting social cohesion in the present. In this way, foundation myths offer an avenue for national narratives to be shaped by political elites who seek to define a collective identity that reflects the aspirations of the people. Foundation myths also have the ability to unify diverse groups within a nation. In countries with multiple ethnic groups, such as Brazil or Mexico, the myth of the nation's founding can provide a common framework for diverse populations to come together under a single national identity. In Mexico, for instance, the myth of the Aztec heritage, coupled with the narrative of Spanish conquest and the subsequent melding of Spanish and indigenous cultures, has been instrumental in creating a unified national story. The figure of the Aztec ruler Moctezuma, the story of the conquest led by Hernan Cortés, and the subsequent blending of cultures form the foundation myth of modern Mexico. This myth, with its blending of indigenous and European elements, provides a narrative that allows Mexicans of various backgrounds to feel connected to a shared history and destiny. In other instances, the foundation myth becomes a point of contention or a tool of division. In regions that have experienced significant political fragmentation or conflict, foundation myths can be used to create or exacerbate divisions. For example, in the case of the former Yugoslavia, the various ethnic groups each constructed their own foundation myths based on historical grievances and collective memories of past triumphs or victimhood. These myths, rooted in different interpretations of historical events, were employed by political elites to stoke nationalist sentiments and justify violent conflict. The use of such myths to justify political and military actions highlights the darker side of these narratives. In this context, foundation myths are not tools of unity but of division, serving as a way to rationalize exclusion, repression, and violence. The political power of foundation myths is not confined solely to the way they unify or divide nations. These myths can also be manipulated and adapted to respond to changing political realities. The myth of the divine right of kings, which once legitimized monarchs as the earthly representatives of God, has been transformed in many countries into a myth of national sovereignty. The sovereignty of the people, once viewed as divinely ordained in the context of monarchies, is now a cornerstone of democratic governance. For example, the notion of divine kingship, used by European monarchs for centuries, gave way to the idea of popular sovereignty, especially after revolutions such as the French Revolution. In France, the foundation myth of the Republic, established after the fall of the monarchy, serves to reaffirm the legitimacy of the modern state, rooted in the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. It is a myth that contrasts with the older myth of royal divine right, instead placing sovereignty in the hands of the people. In some cases, foundation myths serve not only to unite a nation, but also to shield the ruling elite from scrutiny. The myth of the benevolent ruler is a common feature in many monarchies and autocratic regimes. Leaders often construct their personal mythologies as a way of presenting themselves as guardians of the nation, protecting it from internal and external threats. In this context, the myth becomes a tool for consolidating power and maintaining control, reinforcing the legitimacy of the regime in the eyes of the public. By framing the ruler as a protector and champion of the people, these myths obscure the realities of power and governance, presenting an idealized version of leadership that often bears little resemblance to the harshness of political life. In summary, foundation myths have proven to be powerful political tools across history, serving to legitimize political authority, unite diverse populations, and shape national identities. Whether through divine ancestry, heroic feats, or struggles for independence, these myths provide a framework for understanding the political order and the place of individuals within it. They offer a narrative of continuity and destiny, binding the past to the present and offering a path forward for the future. Yet, these myths are not static. They are adapted and reshaped as political contexts evolve. They are also open to reinterpretation and contestation, as different political movements seek to align themselves with or against the established narrative. Ultimately, foundation myths continue to shape political thought and action, offering a powerful tool for the construction and maintenance of political power. The Roman Forum, birthplace of civic life. The Roman Forum, situated at the heart of ancient Rome, is often considered the birthplace of Roman civic life. This sprawling plaza, which served as the epicenter of politics, religion, and commerce, was the lifeblood of the Roman Republic and later the Roman Empire. In its early days, the Forum began as a simple marketplace, a marshy land at the foot of the Capitoline Hill, surrounded by important temples and public buildings. It gradually evolved into the venue for the most significant and influential events in Roman society, shaping the very essence of Roman governance and civic engagement. The origins of the Roman Forum can be traced back to the 7th century BCE, when the first efforts to drain the marshy land were undertaken. The efforts were tied to the early kings of Rome, who sought to create a central location for public activities. The land, once marshy and unfit for development, was transformed into an open space where various forms of public interaction could take place. This space allowed for important gatherings, such as market days, where citizens came together to exchange goods, ideas, and news. But the forum's role expanded significantly as Roman society became more complex and the need for a space to carry out civic functions grew. By the 6th century BCE, the forum was already becoming a more formalized space. During the reign of the Tarquin kings, important religious rituals were performed in the area, and the first public building, the Comitium, was erected to accommodate assemblies. The Comitium was the focal point for political gatherings, where Roman citizens could participate in the process of lawmaking, hear speeches, and witness the trials of those accused of various crimes. The forum became not just a market space, but a location where the business of the Roman state was conducted. It was here that the Senate met, where magistrates held court, and where the people gathered to listen to orators and leaders of Rome. The forum also hosted religious ceremonies, as the Romans believed their society's success was rooted in the favor of the gods. Temples dedicated to various deities lined the forum, including the Temple of Saturn, the Temple of Castor and Pollux, and the Temple of Vesta. These temples played a central role in the public life of Rome, as priests and religious officials performed rituals to ensure the safety and prosperity of the city. The Vestal Virgins, who tended the sacred flame in the Temple of Vesta, were among the most revered figures in Roman society. These rituals served not only as a means of securing divine favor, but also as a way to unite the people through shared religious experiences. Over time, as the Roman Republic grew in influence and power, the forum's importance grew along with it. The construction of monumental buildings and monuments transformed the space into a symbol of Roman strength and culture. The Senate House, known as the Curia, was constructed during the 3rd century BCE. This building was the heart of political power, where the Senate, the most powerful political body in the Roman Republic, met to debate laws, appoint officials, and make decisions that affected the entire state. The Curia's presence in the forum reinforced the idea that this was the central hub of Roman political life. As the Roman Republic transitioned into the Roman Empire, the forum continued to serve as a space where imperial propaganda, civic pride, and public spectacles were intertwined. Under Emperor Augustus, significant changes were made to the forum's layout and structure. The construction of the Temple of Caesar, the Arch of Titus, and other monuments further cemented the forum's role as the symbolic center of the empire. The forum now became not just a place for civic life, but a showcase of Roman imperial power, celebrating the achievements of the emperor and the military victories that brought wealth and glory to the empire. The forum also witnessed the darker side of Roman politics. Public trials, often involving high-profile figures, took place in this public arena. The trial of famous Romans such as Gaius Verres, the corrupt governor of Sicily, or the trial of Catiline, who conspired against the Roman state, were pivotal moments in Roman history. These trials often had dramatic consequences, with individuals being found guilty of various crimes and their fates decided in front of the masses. The political stakes were high, and the outcomes were sometimes far-reaching, impacting the balance of power in Rome and the lives of those involved. The presence of the forum during the rise and fall of many Roman leaders made it a symbolic space of power struggles. Julius Caesar, for example, used the forum to mark his political power. After his triumphs in Gaul, he marched into the forum in 49 BCE, an act that signified his dominance in the Republic. His subsequent assassination, plotted by a group of senators, took place against the backdrop of the Senate House in the forum. This event, one of the most famous in Roman history, symbolized the unraveling of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the empire. The legacy of the Roman Forum is reflected in the very fabric of modern cities and governments. Its blend of civic, religious, and political life inspired the structures of modern democratic systems, where citizens gather to discuss matters of governance, celebrate victories, and carry out judicial and legislative functions. Today, the ruins of the Roman Forum serve as a reminder of the grandeur of ancient Rome, as well as the complexities of its political and social systems. Visitors who walk through the remnants of the Forum are transported back in time, imagining what life must have been like for those who walked its marble-paved streets, witnessed momentous events, and participated in the shaping of one of the world's greatest empires. The enduring influence of the Roman Forum can also be seen in the architectural layout of modern cities, particularly those influenced by Roman traditions. The concept of a central public space where politics, commerce, and religion converge can be found in the town squares and city centers of many European cities. The Forum set the stage for the development of modern democratic institutions, where the voices of the people are heard and decisions are made in the open, ensuring a transparency that was rooted in the traditions of ancient Rome. Even in the modern era, the spirit of the Roman Forum continues to guide the principles of civic life, the importance of participation, and the value of public space for the common good. The Roman Forum represents the convergence of many elements of Roman society: commerce, politics, religion, and social life, all taking place within a shared public space. It was not just a place for the elites to congregate and make decisions, but a space that was integral to the daily lives of ordinary Romans. The Forum was a symbol of unity, where citizens could meet, discuss, and participate in the life of the state. It stood as a testament to the ideals of Roman citizenship, where the success of the state was tied to the involvement and dedication of its people. As a historical site, the Roman Forum continues to be an invaluable resource for understanding the complexity of ancient Roman society. The excavations and ongoing preservation efforts allow modern scholars and visitors alike to peer into the past and learn about the intricate workings of Roman civilization. Through the remnants of its temples, monuments, and public buildings, we gain insight into the values and aspirations of a civilization that laid the foundations for much of the modern world. The Forum stands as a beacon of the civic life that once thrived in ancient Rome, offering a glimpse into the heart of one of history's most influential societies. The Cloaca Maxima, engineering Rome from the ground up. The Cloaca Maxima, one of the most impressive engineering feats of ancient Rome, represents a monumental achievement in the development of Roman infrastructure. As one of the world's oldest and most advanced systems for drainage and sewage, it played an essential role in the growth and prosperity of the city. Its construction and operation not only reflect the advanced engineering skills of the Romans, but also highlight the importance of sanitation in urban planning and public health. The Cloaca Maxima served as the backbone for the sewage and waste management system, setting the stage for urban living in one of the most populous and influential cities in history. The origins of the Cloaca Maxima date back to the late 6th century BCE, when Rome was still a fledgling city under the rule of the last Etruscan king, Tarquinius Priscus. It was under his reign that the idea of constructing a sewer system first took shape. Rome, like many ancient cities, had a complex relationship with water. The city's location along the Tiber River made it vulnerable to flooding, while the hills and uneven terrain created difficulties for drainage. To address these challenges, a sophisticated system was conceived that would help manage both waste and floodwaters. The initial construction of the Cloaca Maxima was an ambitious endeavor, as it required the excavation of large tunnels beneath the city. Using a combination of stone, concrete, and brick, the Romans created a network of canals that funneled waste from various parts of the city into the Tiber River. The engineers responsible for this monumental task demonstrated remarkable foresight in their design, creating a system that not only served the immediate needs of the city's inhabitants, but also ensured long-term functionality. It was an early example of Roman engineering prowess, combining both practical utility and impressive architectural design. As Rome grew, so did the importance of the Cloaca Maxima. The city's expansion required an ever-increasing capacity for waste management and the sewer system was constantly updated and maintained. Over the centuries, the system underwent numerous modifications and extensions, ensuring that it remained functional as the city continued to thrive. The Romans developed a comprehensive approach to urban planning that included regular maintenance of public works, such as the Cloaca Maxima, demonstrating their commitment to maintaining public health and cleanliness. The Cloaca Maxima was not merely a drainage system, it was a symbol of Roman ingenuity and the city's ability to manage complex infrastructure on a grand scale. The size of the sewer tunnels was vast, and they were built to withstand the weight of the buildings and roads above. The design of the Cloaca Maxima allowed for the flow of both sewage and stormwater, an essential feature that helped prevent flooding during the rainy seasons. The Romans were adept at harnessing water for both practical and aesthetic purposes, and the Cloaca Maxima served as a functional and integral part of the city's infrastructure. Roman engineers also recognized the importance of maintaining the cleanliness and flow of their sewage system. To ensure that the Cloaca Maxima remained free of blockages and waste buildup, they implemented regular cleaning and inspection procedures. This commitment to upkeep contributed to the system's longevity, ensuring that it continued to serve the growing city for centuries. The fact that parts of the Cloaca Maxima still function today is a testament to the durability and effectiveness of Roman engineering. The sewer system also had broader implications for the public health of Rome. As the city expanded, the population grew, and the challenges of managing waste became more complex. The Cloaca Maxima helped to control the spread of disease by ensuring that waste was carried away from the city's living areas, reducing the risk of contamination and waterborne illnesses. In a time before modern sanitation practices, the ability to manage waste efficiently was essential to the survival and well-being of Rome's citizens. The importance of the Cloaca Maxima extended beyond Rome's borders. The sewer system became a model for other cities in the ancient world, influencing urban planning in places as far-flung as Pompeii and Carthage. The Romans were known for their practical approach to city building, and the Cloaca Maxima was one of the key components that allowed Rome to become the thriving metropolis it was. The ability to manage waste effectively was an integral part of the city's growth and its ability to sustain large populations. Over time, the Cloaca Maxima became more than just a functional infrastructure. It became a part of Roman culture and identity. The system was celebrated for its engineering achievements, and it was often invoked as a symbol of the Roman state's power and authority. The process of constructing and maintaining the sewer system was a civic responsibility, and it became a point of pride for Romans. It was a reflection of the Roman ethos, which valued order, efficiency, and public service. The lasting legacy of the Cloaca Maxima can still be seen today in the modern sewer systems of many cities around the world. The Romans set the standard for urban drainage, and their engineering innovations continue to influence the way we approach waste management and infrastructure development. The system's ability to function for centuries is a testament to the ingenuity and foresight of the engineers who designed it. It stands as a reminder of the remarkable achievements of ancient Rome and the crucial role that sanitation played in the success of one of history's greatest civilizations. In the context of modern Rome, the Cloaca Maxima serves as both a historical artifact and a functional system. Though much of the city's infrastructure has changed over the centuries, the sewer system remains an enduring symbol of Roman innovation. Visitors to the city can still see remnants of the original tunnels, marveling at the engineering skills that allowed such a system to endure. Today, the Cloaca Maxima is not only a reminder of the Roman Empire's grandeur, but also a reminder of the practical challenges that every civilization faces in managing its urban environments. The Cloaca Maxima stands as one of the many examples of Roman engineering that contributed to the success of their civilization. It helped transform Rome from a small settlement into a sprawling metropolis that could support hundreds of thousands of people. The sewer system was essential to the city's growth, prosperity, and public health. It is a testament to the Roman commitment to infrastructure, public service, and the well-being of its citizens. While the Cloaca Maxima may no longer serve the same function as it did in ancient times, Its legacy endures, reminding us of the enduring power of Roman engineering and the importance of infrastructure in the development of civilization. The continued success of the Cloaca Maxima also reflected the Roman approach to innovation. Unlike many other ancient civilizations, the Romans were keen to build upon their existing infrastructure, constantly adapting and improving systems to meet the growing demands of their society. As the city of Rome became more populous, the importance of a well-maintained sewage system grew exponentially. The Roman commitment to expanding the Cloaca Maxima was a direct response to the challenges posed by urbanization, a recognition that sanitation was not just a practical need, but also a vital component of the city's longevity. In addition to its practical role in waste management, the Cloaca Maxima also held a cultural significance. The system was an embodiment of Roman values, particularly those of discipline and civic responsibility. Public works, such as the Cloaca Maxima, were considered communal achievements, something that belonged to all Romans. The city's infrastructure was seen as a symbol of unity and strength, reflecting the Roman belief in the collective welfare of society. This attitude towards public works laid the foundation for the Roman approach to governance and urban development, where the needs of the state were prioritized over individual concerns. Today, the Cloaca Maxima's lasting impact extends far beyond its original function. It serves as a reminder of the enduring ingenuity of Roman engineering and the critical role infrastructure plays in the growth and stability of civilizations. Women in Rome's foundation stories. In the foundation stories of Rome, women play a pivotal yet often overlooked role, subtly influencing the city's origins and shaping its cultural fabric. While the most famous Roman myths, such as the tale of Romulus and Remus, tend to focus on the male heroes, the contributions and fates of women in these stories highlight crucial aspects of Roman society, particularly in terms of its values, politics, and identity. The Roman historical narrative, constructed from both myth and legend, reveals the intertwining of gender roles, family dynamics, and the essential roles women played in maintaining the structure and stability of society. While Roman mythos typically portrays men as the central figures in the foundation of Rome, women's involvement reveals the complex relationship between gender, power, and the creation of a lasting civilization. The legend of the founding of Rome is a tale of twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, the children of the god Mars and the Vestal Virgin Rhea Silvia. Rhea Silvia's role in the myth is crucial because, without her, the birth of the twins would not have been possible. Rhea Silvia's forced role as a Vestal Virgin, who was supposed to remain chaste, complicates the relationship between the divine and the human world. Her encounter with Mars, resulting in the birth of the twins, highlights a recurring theme in Roman mythology: the intersection of divine intervention and human desire. In the grand narrative of Rome's establishment, Rhea Silvia's legacy is often overshadowed by the more overt actions of Romulus, yet her ability to defy both the divine and societal expectations resonates as a symbol of both strength and vulnerability. The founding of Rome is also intertwined with the myth of the Sabine women, whose forced abduction is a foundational event in Rome's expansion and consolidation of power. In the early days of the city, Romulus and his followers, desperate for women to ensure the growth of their community, devised a bold plan to abduct women from the neighboring Sabine tribe during a festival. The abduction of the Sabine women is one of the most famous and controversial aspects of Roman mythology, illustrating the early Romans' audacity and determination to secure their future. In many ways, the event underscores the patriarchal dynamics of Roman society, where women were often treated as commodities or pawns in the pursuit of power. However, the tale also highlights the agency of the women who, upon being kidnapped, played a key role in the resolution of the conflict. As the women intervened to stop the fighting between their Roman husbands and Sabine fathers, they became symbols of peace and unity, reflecting the vital role that women held in both nurturing and protecting the social fabric. While the abduction of the Sabine women might appear to reinforce the oppressive status of women in early Roman society, it also reflects a deeper theme of reconciliation and mutual respect. The women's actions act as a bridge between two conflicting communities, transforming them from victims into crucial actors in the city's unification. Their role in the myth is not simply one of passive suffering, but one of active involvement in shaping the political future of Rome. This shift from victimhood to agency can be seen as an early recognition of the integral place that women held in Roman society, not just in domestic settings, but in the political and military spheres as well. The Roman establishment also involves the figure of Lucretia, whose tragic story further exemplifies the importance of women in shaping the course of Roman history. Lucretia's role in the overthrow of the monarchy is one of the most poignant episodes in early Roman history. Lucretia was a noblewoman who, after being raped by Sextus Tarquinius, the son of the last king of Rome, committed suicide as a result of the dishonor she felt. Her death ignited a rebellion led by Lucius Junius Brutus, which ultimately led to the expulsion of the Tarquins and the establishment of the Roman Republic. Lucretia's story illustrates the Roman ideals of honor, virtue, and sacrifice, all of which were central to the identity of the Roman state. Her story, though tragic, became a rallying cry for the abolition of the monarchy and the formation of the Republic. The respect for women's honor in Roman society is evident in the way Lucretia's death served as a catalyst for political change, demonstrating that women's roles were not solely confined to the domestic sphere, but could also influence the course of Roman politics. The impact of women in the foundation myths of Rome also extends beyond the early days of the city to its political and religious institutions. The Roman matron, revered for her strength and virtue, became a symbol of Roman ideals. Women were responsible for upholding the moral and social order, and their actions often set the tone for Roman political life. The ideal Roman woman was seen as a paragon of domestic virtue, managing the household and bearing children who would grow up to serve the state. The Vestal Virgins, a group of priestesses dedicated to the goddess Vesta, were an essential part of Rome's religious life. These women held an esteemed position in Roman society, responsible for maintaining the sacred fire that symbolized the stability of the Roman state. The Vestals were often seen as embodiments of purity and devotion, and their service was considered vital to the endurance of Rome. Their influence in Roman society was considerable, and their status as priestesses allowed them to exert a unique form of power. Moreover, the tales of women in Rome's foundation myths highlight the tension between personal sacrifice and public duty. Whether it was Rhea Silvia's forced motherhood, the Sabine women's intervention in warfare, or Lucretia's ultimate sacrifice, women's roles in the foundation stories of Rome illustrate the complexities of female agency in a patriarchal society. These women were not passive victims, but active participants whose actions had profound consequences for the creation and survival of the Roman state. The myths surrounding these women reveal a dual narrative, one that acknowledges their subordinate roles while also recognizing their pivotal contributions to Rome's political and social transformation. The legacy of these foundational women endured throughout Roman history, with the stories of Rhea Silvia, the Sabine women, and Lucretia continuing to resonate as symbols of virtue, sacrifice, and unity. While women's roles were often circumscribed by societal expectations, these stories suggest that their influence was far-reaching, shaping not only the origins of the Roman state, but also its long-lasting traditions of family, virtue, and political participation. These women's actions, whether through passive endurance or active resistance, reflect the enduring tension between personal autonomy and the collective needs of society, a theme that would continue to echo throughout Roman history. In conclusion, while the male figures in Rome's foundation myths often take center stage, the stories of women in these myths reveal their crucial, though sometimes hidden, role in the creation and shaping of Rome. These women, through their courage, sacrifice, and resilience, played a foundational role in both the political and social spheres of the early Roman state. Their involvement in the myths not only highlights the gender dynamics of Roman society, but also provides a deeper understanding of how power, family, and virtue were interwoven in the formation of one of history's greatest civilizations. Despite being largely relegated to the background in many narratives, the women of Rome's foundation stories were, in truth, indispensable to the city's birth and survival. Their stories continue to serve as powerful reminders of the complex ways in which women have shaped the course of history, even in societies where their roles were often marginalized. Shepherds and soldiers, the rustic roots of Rome. The origins of Rome, one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known, can be traced to the humble and rugged life of the shepherds and soldiers who inhabited its early days. Long before the grandeur of its empire and the majesty of its city, Rome was a small settlement, a blend of pastoral traditions and the militaristic spirit that would later define the Roman identity. This unassuming foundation laid the groundwork for a powerful empire built on discipline, duty, and the strength of its people. In the early days, the Romans were not the mighty empire they would become, but rather a society shaped by the trials of survival. The early Romans were shepherds, farmers, and soldiers, their lives defined by the harsh realities of the land and the constant threat of external aggression. The simple life of the shepherd was at the core of early Roman society, symbolizing the connection to the earth, the simplicity of the Roman way of life, and their reliance on each other for survival. These shepherds, often moving their flocks between the hills and plains of the surrounding lands, formed the backbone of early Roman society, providing sustenance and raw materials for the city that was just beginning to form. The first Roman soldiers, too, were not the professional warriors that would later be seen in the legions, but rather ordinary citizens who took up arms to protect their community. They were not trained in the arts of war from birth, but rather they were farmers and shepherds who, when called upon, turned from the plow to the sword. The harshness of the Roman environment, with its ever-present threats from neighboring tribes and the constant need to secure resources, made military service a necessary part of life. The Roman soldier was an extension of the Roman citizen, rugged, tough, and unwilling to yield in the face of adversity. The soldier's life was one of constant training and readiness, and this ethos was deeply ingrained in Roman culture. The idea of service to the state, of putting the good of the community above personal comfort, was paramount. These early Roman soldiers were not mercenaries, but citizens fulfilling their duty, and it was this spirit of collective responsibility that would eventually lead to Rome's expansion and dominance. This connection between the pastoral life and military service formed the very essence of Roman identity. The Roman soldier was as much a farmer as he was a warrior, and the discipline required for shepherding and farming was directly translatable to the battlefield. One of the most iconic symbols of Roman society, the Roman legionary, was forged from this blend of pastoral simplicity and military readiness. The Romans believed in the virtue of discipline and sacrifice, qualities that were born from the hardships of the land and the necessity of self-reliance. The Roman soldier's devotion to duty was unparalleled, but it was rooted in the same survivalist mentality that had driven the shepherds to protect their flocks from predators and thieves. This was a society that even in its earliest stages understood the importance of unity, of the individual putting aside personal desires for the greater good of the group. As Rome grew, it began to adopt more structured forms of government, and the military became more formalized. However, the spirit of the early shepherds and soldiers remained embedded in the Roman psyche. The values of discipline, loyalty, and strength that had been nurtured in the fields and hills of early Rome were now manifested in the Roman legions, which would go on to conquer much of the known world. The connection between the land and the soldier remained strong throughout Roman history, as military campaigns often began with the mobilization of local farmers and shepherds who would take up arms to protect their homes. The early Roman soldiers' experience in battle was not just about defeating enemies, but also about the protection of their families, their lands, and their way of life. This strong bond between soldier and civilian would later evolve into the Roman legions, the highly disciplined and professional army that would become one of the most feared fighting forces in the ancient world. But even in this transformation, the essence of the early Roman soldier remained. The Roman soldier, much like the shepherd, was a protector, whether it was of the flock or the empire. In the development of Rome as a city-state, the role of the soldier and the shepherd became intertwined with the political and social structures of the city. The early Roman kings, many of whom were former military leaders, recognized the importance of the military in maintaining the strength of the state. These kings also understood the value of the pastoral lifestyle, as it kept the citizens grounded in the simple, hard-working values that had made Rome strong in the first place. The mix of military leadership and pastoral simplicity helped to create a unique political system that would evolve into the Roman Republic and later the Roman Empire. The development of Rome was not just a tale of military conquest, but of a society that valued the strength of its people, people who had been shaped by the harsh realities of their environment. The soldier, the shepherd, and the farmer were all seen as integral parts of Roman society, each contributing to the city's survival and growth. The Roman military, while becoming increasingly professional and organized, would always carry the ethos of the early Roman soldier, a man who was both a protector of his people and a servant to the state. This combination of civic duty and military prowess would prove to be a decisive factor in Rome's rise to power. The early Romans were aware that their survival depended on the strength of their military, but they also understood that a strong military was only possible because of the work of their shepherds, farmers, and laborers. The value of hard work and sacrifice was embedded in every aspect of Roman life, from the fields to the battlefield. The Roman soldier was not just a warrior, he was a symbol of the Roman way of life, one that valued duty, discipline, and the preservation of the community. Through the eyes of the shepherds and soldiers, we can see the genesis of Rome. It was not the product of a single moment, but the gradual development of a society forged by necessity and shaped by the values of its people. The rustic roots of Rome, deep in the soil of its past, provided the foundation for the city's rise to greatness. It was through the efforts of these early shepherds and soldiers, bound together by a common goal and a shared sense of purpose, that Rome was able to begin its journey toward empire. And in their struggle, we see the birth of the Roman identity, one that would shape the world for centuries to come. As Rome expanded, the roles of shepherds and soldiers continued to influence its development. The disciplined nature of the early Romans, formed in the fields and hills, became the hallmark of the Roman identity. These citizens were not only defenders of the land, but also bearers of Roman values, which they carried into the battles and political struggles that lay ahead. As Rome transitioned from a small city-state to a growing empire, the military continued to be composed of citizens who were deeply connected to their roots. The early Roman soldiers' journey from shepherd to warrior symbolized the seamless integration of duty, labor, and service to the state. This integration of the pastoral and the martial ensured that Rome's strength was built on both the resilience of its military and the unwavering work ethic of its people, laying the foundation for the enduring legacy of Roman power and governance. From village to vision, how a city became an empire. The rise of cities from humble villages to mighty empires is one of the most awe-inspiring phenomena in human history. It marks the story of ambition, power, and the unwavering drive to shape the future. This journey is not merely about the physical growth of settlements, but about the gradual expansion of ideas, institutions, and visions. A small village, once insignificant in the grand scheme of the world, gradually transforms into a thriving city, then a regional power, and ultimately a sprawling empire. This transformation does not happen overnight. It is a gradual process influenced by a multitude of factors: geography, military conquests, economic prosperity, and the shaping of a culture that unites a people under a single banner. In the early stages, what began as a simple settlement is often located near fertile lands or important resources. Natural geography, such as rivers, mountains, or coastlines, plays an essential role in determining the future of a village. A settlement near a river might be a trading hub, while one near fertile lands could become the cradle of agriculture. These natural advantages create the foundation upon which a future empire will stand. The people in these early villages are often organized into close-knit communities where survival is a constant challenge. The harsh realities of nature shape the character of the people. They become resilient, resourceful, and, most importantly, adaptable. In these early stages, what sets apart the rise of a village into a larger, thriving community is the development of a unified vision. Often, it is a charismatic leader or a council of elders that helps define the direction of the village. Leadership at this point is driven by necessity. The challenges of early settlement life demand a strong figure or group to coordinate efforts. whether it's to build infrastructure, defend against enemies, or ensure the fair distribution of resources. The vision of these leaders often revolves around growth and security, ensuring that the settlement not only survives, but thrives. As these villages grow, so too do their ambitions. With more people come more ideas, more specialization, and a more structured society. What was once a small community based on agricultural work slowly transforms into a bustling urban center. A market emerges, trade routes are established, and the economy starts to grow. The people, no longer just surviving, begin to accumulate wealth. This wealth often translates into power. As the settlement expands and resources increase, so too does the need for organized governance. The leaders of these villages, often military commanders or wealthy merchants, begin to formalize their rule. The shift from informal leadership to more structured forms of governance, be it a monarchy, oligarchy, or early form of democracy, marks a significant step in the evolution from a village to a city-state. The next stage of this transformation involves the consolidation of power. Leaders who once rose to prominence through sheer strength and charisma begin to formalize their rule. Laws are enacted, and systems of justice are established. The city begins to develop the characteristics of a more complex society, one that balances the needs of its citizens with the necessities of defense, trade, and governance. In this stage, the vision of the leaders shifts. No longer are they focused solely on securing the survival of the community, but on ensuring its dominance. The city-state begins to reach out beyond its borders. Trade networks are expanded, alliances are formed, and, perhaps most importantly, military might is organized. A city's rise is often accelerated by its ability to create a strong and capable military force. War, while destructive, can also serve as a catalyst for growth. Conquering neighboring villages or rival city-states brings not only resources but also political power. Military conquests, whether they are defensive or aggressive, allow for the expansion of territory. As a city conquers more land, it begins to gain a foothold in the region. This expansion fuels the growth of the empire, and soon the city is no longer just a single settlement, but a sprawling network of conquered lands, people, and resources. The once small village that started by a river or on fertile land now stretches across vast areas, controlled by a singular vision. This expansion does not come without challenges. As the empire grows, so too does the complexity of governance. What started as a small community with a handful of leaders now requires a vast administrative apparatus. The systems that once worked in a small city are no longer effective in a sprawling empire. At this stage, the empire must innovate. New forms of taxation, new laws, and new ways to keep the far reaches of the empire under control become necessary. Often this requires the development of infrastructure, roads, aqueducts, and bridges to connect far-flung territories. It also requires a new class of administrators, soldiers, and merchants, all of whom must be kept loyal to the empire's central authority. The vision of an empire, however, is not just about land and power. It is also about culture and identity. As the empire expands, its leaders begin to create symbols of unity. The formation of a shared culture becomes essential to binding together the disparate regions and peoples. Language, religion, art, and education are all used to create a sense of belonging and pride among the citizens of the empire. The leaders, often the ruling class, see the creation of this unified culture as a means to solidify their rule. They commission monuments, coins, and grand structures that symbolize the might and unity of the empire. The rise of cultural identity is as important to the empire's growth as its military and economic strength. However, the greater an empire grows, the more fragile its unity becomes. The vision of the empire may become diluted as the needs of different regions clash. New challenges arise: internal rebellions, economic downturns, and external threats. The very size of the empire, once an asset, now becomes a liability. Communication becomes slower, and the control over distant lands becomes weaker. The once unified vision of the leaders starts to splinter. The empire, once held together by a singular vision and the strength of its military, now faces the forces of fragmentation. Civil unrest, internal revolutions, and the external pressure from rival empires threaten the stability of the once mighty empire. Despite these challenges, the city that grew into an empire remains an enduring symbol of human achievement. It serves as a testament to the vision of its founders and the relentless ambition of its leaders. While empires may fall, their legacies live on in the cities they created. The architectural marvels, the laws they established, and the cultural innovations they brought to the world continue to influence societies long after their decline. The rise of a city into an empire is not just a story of political conquest and military victories, but a story of human ingenuity, vision, and the power of unity. As the empire eventually begins to crumble under the weight of its own success, the vision that once united its people begins to fragment. However, the lessons of how a city became an empire through ambition, innovation, and the shared vision of its people remain. The memory of those early days when a humble village set out with a vision to conquer the world continues to inspire the cities and nations that follow. The transformation from village to empire is not just a political or economic journey, but a philosophical one as well. It speaks to the human desire for growth, power, and the ability to shape the future, no matter how humble the beginnings may have been. The journey from a humble village to an expansive empire is one that unfolds over centuries, driven by the evolution of social, economic, and political structures. The process involves far more than just the expansion of borders and the accumulation of wealth. It also requires a deep transformation in the way society functions, the way individuals think, and the way governance is carried out. At the heart of this transition is the emergence of ideas that transcend the immediate concerns of survival and seek a more ambitious vision for the future. These ideas are the bedrock of the empire, guiding its growth and shaping its identity. Initially, as the city-state grows in size and importance, so too does the complexity of its society. Early rulers who focused on military victories and the acquisition of wealth soon realized that their power cannot rest solely on military prowess. A more intricate form of governance is required to manage the increasingly diverse population, control vast territories, and facilitate the flow of goods and ideas. This stage marks a turning point in the evolution from a village to an empire. As cities become centers of commerce and culture, a more sophisticated structure of laws and institutions must be established to ensure that society functions smoothly. At this point, the empire begins to develop a legal and bureaucratic infrastructure that spans the entire realm. The development of law becomes a key marker of the city's transformation into an empire. Early laws, often based on customs and traditions, give way to more formalized legal systems designed to regulate every aspect of life within the empire. These legal codes establish the rights and responsibilities of individuals and the relationship between rulers and the ruled. Laws are no longer merely a tool for ensuring order within the city. They are now a means of legitimizing power, creating a sense of justice, and establishing the empire's moral authority. Whether through written codes, royal decrees, or legal scholars, the law becomes a means of integrating the far-flung corners of the empire, just ensuring that a common system governs every aspect of life, from land ownership to trade to military service. As the empire grows, the challenge of maintaining control over vast territories becomes increasingly difficult. The central authority that once commanded loyalty and respect begins to face challenges from within. The empire's expansion, while providing wealth and resources, also leads to internal fragmentation. Diverse regions, each with its own local customs, languages, and traditions, find it difficult to remain under the central rule. This fragmentation often leads to uprisings and rebellions as local leaders seek to assert their autonomy. The empire, once unified by a singular vision, now finds itself in a battle to preserve its cohesion. To counter this, imperial leaders must develop strategies to keep the diverse population united under a common cause. One of the ways empires seek to maintain unity is through the promotion of cultural integration. The leaders of empires understand that the strength of the empire lies not only in its military and economic might, but in the shared identity of its people. They turn to art, architecture, and religion to create a common cultural framework. Monuments are erected, symbols of imperial power are displayed, and religious practices are standardized. The empire's leaders often try to blend the cultural traditions of the conquered people with their own, creating a hybrid culture that serves as a unifying force. The success of this cultural integration determines the empire's ability to maintain power over time. Furthermore, the elite class that emerges in an empire plays a crucial role in shaping its future. These elites, often consisting of military commanders, wealthy landowners, and high-ranking officials, are the architects of the empire's prosperity. They are responsible for making key decisions about governance, military strategy, and economic policy. As the empire expands, these elites are often rewarded with land, wealth, and political power, solidifying their position at the top of society. Their influence extends beyond the courts and palaces. They shape the very institutions that govern the empire. This class of elites, however, can also become a source of tension within the empire. As the wealth of the empire increases, so too does the inequality between the ruling class and the common people. This inequality often leads to class struggles, with the lower classes rising up in protest against the elites. The ability of the empire to maintain its strength depends largely on the stability of its economic system. As the empire grows, it requires a constant flow of resources to fuel its military campaigns, support its growing population, and build the infrastructure that ties its territories together. Trade becomes an essential part of this system, and as the empire expands its reach, so too do its trade networks. Control over key trade routes and valuable resources is essential for maintaining the empire's economic power. The development of infrastructure, such as roads, ports, and markets, facilitates the movement of goods, allowing the empire to thrive economically. The wealth generated through trade and commerce, however, also comes with challenges. As different regions of the empire become economically interconnected, so too do the tensions between wealthy elites and the impoverished masses. Economic inequality becomes a critical issue that threatens the empire's cohesion. As the empire's borders expand, so too does the complexity of its military strategy. A small city-state may have been able to defend itself with a small professional army, but as the empire grows, it requires a much larger and more diverse military force. The empire must balance its need for skilled soldiers with the logistical challenge of maintaining an army that can patrol vast territories. A military that was once an instrument of conquest now becomes an instrument of control. Empires often develop sophisticated military strategies to maintain order within their borders. Garrison troops are stationed in key regions to suppress uprisings and protect trade routes. The empire's military becomes a powerful tool for maintaining internal stability and asserting its dominance over rival powers. The transition from a city-state to an empire is also marked by the development of diplomacy. As the empire expands, it must interact with other powers, both friendly and hostile. Diplomacy becomes an essential tool for maintaining peace, negotiating trade agreements, and securing alliances. The leaders of the empire engage in delicate diplomatic negotiations, balancing their interests with those of other states. Diplomacy allows the empire to maintain its dominance without resorting to constant warfare. It is through diplomacy that empires often manage to preserve their influence over neighboring regions and prevent the emergence of rival powers. Despite the efforts to maintain control, the empire's strength begins to wane over time. As the empire expands, the leadership often becomes more centralized and less responsive to the needs of its diverse population. The larger the empire grows, the more difficult it becomes to govern effectively. The empire's reach begins to outpace its ability to maintain order, and corruption sets in. Provincial leaders become more independent, and the empire struggles to assert its authority over distant territories. The sheer size of the empire makes it vulnerable to invasion, rebellion, and internal decay. What was once a unified empire begins to fracture, and the vision that drove its expansion starts to unravel. Empires that once stood as symbols of power and unity eventually fall, but their legacies live on. The cities that began as small villages become icons of history, their ruins telling the story of an age gone by. While the empire may crumble, the culture, laws, and institutions it created continue to influence the world for centuries to come. The transition from village to empire is a reminder that the journey of growth and power is both fragile and enduring, driven by the vision of those who sought to leave a mark on history. And while the empire may fade into the past, the city that rose from humble beginnings remains a testament to the power of ambition, vision, and human will. Aeneas and the Trojan legacy. In the vast sea of ancient legends that shaped the cultural and historical consciousness of the Mediterranean world, the story of Aeneas stands out as a bridge between the mythical past of Troy and the monumental rise of Rome. His journey is not merely a tale of survival or conquest, it is a narrative forged from loss, duty, and the persistent vision of a new homeland destined for greatness. Rooted in both Homeric tradition and Roman propaganda, the legacy of Aeneas was cultivated over centuries, ultimately becoming a cornerstone of Roman identity and imperial ideology. His odyssey from the smoldering ruins of Troy to the fertile lands of Italy laid the foundation for a mythic lineage that emperors would later claim as their own. Aeneas first appears in Greek epic literature as a relatively minor figure in Homer's Iliad. A noble Trojan warrior and the son of the goddess Aphrodite and the mortal Anchises, Aeneas is portrayed as a valorous yet peripheral figure in the great conflict between Troy and the Greek coalition. However, while Homer gives Aeneas a divine pedigree and hints at his future significance, it was the Roman poets, most notably Virgil, who elevated him to the status of a civilizational founder. In Virgil's Aeneid, written in the 1st century BCE during the reign of Augustus, Aeneas becomes a paragon of Roman virtues, pious, resolute, and chosen by fate to lay the groundwork for a future empire. According to the epic, Aeneas escaped the fiery destruction of Troy, carrying his aged father Anchises on his back and leading his young son Ascanius by the hand. His wife, Creusa, perished in the chaos, symbolizing the irrevocable severing of ties with the old world. Guided by omens and divine instruction, Aeneas embarked on a journey across the Mediterranean that echoed Odysseus's wanderings, yet diverged in spirit. Where Odysseus sought return, Aeneas sought foundation. He was not returning home, but carrying the seed of a new nation, bearing not just survivors, but the essence of Troy itself. The voyage of Aeneas led him through trials that tested his resolve. He landed in Thrace, where he discovered the tragic fate of a murdered ally, then moved to Delos seeking prophecy. His fleet faced tempests near Crete and was harried by the Harpies and the Strophades. A crucial episode unfolded in Carthage, where Aeneas found temporary refuge with Queen Dido. Their passionate relationship provided a poignant interlude of emotional conflict. Yet Aeneas, reminded of his destiny by the gods, left Carthage abruptly. Dido's curse, born of heartbreak, would echo through the ages as mythological justification for the later animosity between Rome and Carthage. Eventually reaching the shores of Latium in Italy, Aeneas entered the final phase of his mission. His arrival was not met with celebration, but entangled in conflict. He encountered local tribes, political rivalries, and fierce resistance from Turnus, the prince of the Rutulians. The struggle for a homeland became a war not unlike that which had consumed Troy, but this time Aeneas stood not as a defender of a doomed city, but as a harbinger of a new civilization. The battles were brutal, the alliances fragile, and the path to peace fraught with sacrifice. Yet through perseverance, divine favor, and strategic marriage to Lavinia, the daughter of King Latinus, Aeneas secured a future for his people. The legacy of Aeneas was not only military or political, it was deeply symbolic. He embodied the Roman concept of pietas, a profound sense of duty to the gods, his family, and his destined role in history. Unlike the impetuous heroes of Greek epics, Aeneas was often portrayed as burdened by the weight of destiny, rather than driven by personal glory. This made him an ideal figure for the Augustan regime, which sought to align the new Roman Empire with the values of sacrifice, order, and continuity. By tying Augustus' lineage to Aeneas through the Julian family, Roman leaders crafted a divine ancestry that legitimized their authority and elevated the city's origins to celestial significance. Through Ascanius, also known as Iulus, the bloodline of Aeneas was said to continue in the Alban kings, culminating in the birth of Romulus and Remus. This genealogical thread stitched the fall of Troy directly into the founding of Rome, creating a continuous narrative of endurance and divine favor. The destruction of one city gave rise to another, greater one, a concept that resonated powerfully with Roman ideology, especially during times of expansion or reconstruction. The myth served not only as a national origin story, but also as a guiding metaphor. Rome, like Aeneas, would rise from ruin, conquer adversity, and fulfill a cosmic mandate. Beyond the Aeneid, the figure of Aeneas appeared in various forms across Roman literature and visual arts. He was sculpted on altars, painted in frescoes, and celebrated in public monuments. His story was taught to generations of Roman citizens, ensuring that the values he represented remained central to Roman cultural consciousness. As Rome transitioned from republic to empire, the tale of Aeneas offered a model of leadership that emphasized moral duty over ambition, endurance over recklessness, and a sense of purpose larger than the individual. These attributes were instrumental in crafting an image of Rome not only as a military power, but as a moral and civilizing force. The myth of Aeneas also played a significant role in Roman interactions with other cultures. By tracing their roots to the ancient and noble Trojans, the Romans could assert a cultural sophistication that rivaled or even surpassed that of the Greeks. This was particularly important in an era when Hellenistic culture dominated intellectual and artistic life. Aeneas provided a narrative that placed Rome on equal mythological footing, suggesting a divine mission comparable to or even superior to that of Greece. His connections to Asia Minor, Carthage, and Italy also symbolized Rome's trans-Mediterranean reach, reinforcing the idea that its empire was not only political but deeply historical and ordained by fate. In medieval Europe, the story of Aeneas was preserved and reinterpreted, particularly through Christian lenses. His moral struggles and divine mission made him a figure of interest for writers seeking to reconcile classical antiquity with Christian values. While some interpretations criticized his abandonment of Dido or the violent means through which he secured his new homeland, others saw in him a precursor to Christian themes of exile, pilgrimage, and spiritual calling. The continuity of the Aeneas legend through centuries of changing values and political landscapes speaks to its adaptability and enduring power. Even in the modern world, Aeneas continues to resonate. His journey from a shattered homeland to the promise of a new world echoes the experiences of displaced peoples, refugees, and those rebuilding after catastrophe. His dual identity, as both a man of Troy and a founder of Rome, captures the tension between memory and reinvention, between honoring the past and embracing the future. The Aeneas narrative illustrates that identity is not static, but forged in movement, struggle, and the choices made in moments of crisis. Thus, the legacy of Aeneas is not confined to the pages of epic poetry or the annals of Roman propaganda. It is a living thread in the fabric of cultural memory, a story that has transcended its origin to become a universal reflection on endurance, purpose, and transformation. He is remembered not only as a hero of legend, but as a vessel through which civilizations remember who they were and imagine what they could become. In the ruins of Troy and the foundations of Rome, Aeneas walks forever, a figure caught between worlds, bearing the hopes of a people and shaping the course of history through quiet strength and unwavering resolve. The Seven Hills and the early settlements, long before the grandeur of the Roman Republic or the vast empire that would span continents, there existed a cluster of humble settlements perched upon 7 hills near the banks of the Tiber River. These hills, which would later be immortalized in the myths and legends of Roman culture, formed the physical and symbolic foundation of what would become one of history's most influential civilizations. The story of the 7 Hills and the early communities that grew upon them is one of migration, survival, adaptation, and gradual unification, reflecting a time when Rome was nothing more than a strategic confluence of tribal outposts in a landscape both fertile and perilous. The 7 Hills, Aventine, Celian, Capitoline, Esquiline, Palatine, Quirinal, and Viminal, were not settled simultaneously, nor were they always considered part of a unified community. Instead, each hill served as the domain of different groups, each establishing fortified villages or compounds suited to the contours and resources of the land. The choice of these hills for habitation was no accident. They rose just enough above the surrounding plain to offer protection from floods, which the Tiber periodically unleashed upon the valley floor. In an age without engineered drainage systems or sophisticated flood control, elevation could mean the difference between survival and disaster. Beyond the practical advantages, the hills offered natural defensibility. Their steep slopes and rocky outcroppings allowed early settlers to observe and resist potential attackers more effectively than those living on the flatlands below. In an Italy dominated by tribal skirmishes, raids, and shifting alliances, any topographical advantage could be crucial. From their elevated positions, early inhabitants controlled the fords and paths that linked the interior with the coast, setting the stage for what would later become a thriving hub of commerce and power. The early populations were not uniform in culture or origin. Evidence suggests a mosaic of Latin, Sabine, and Etruscan influences mingling within these early hilltop communities. The Latins, possibly the first to settle in the area, brought with them a language and culture that would form the core of Roman identity. The Sabines, highland tribes known for their religious customs and warrior traditions, also had a presence, particularly around the Quirinal Hill. The Etruscans, more advanced in terms of urban planning, metallurgy, and religious organization, would later exert enormous influence on the growing city, especially through their control of the northern territories and their rich ceremonial life. Among the hills, the Palatine stands out as the earliest known site of permanent settlement. Archaeological finds, including post holes and pottery shards dating back to the 10th century BCE, suggest that huts and small farming communities had taken root on the Palatine long before Rome's official founding date of 753 BCE. These early occupants lived in simple structures, constructed from wattle and daub with thatched roofs, and they farmed the surrounding land, raising livestock and growing basic crops. Life was modest and dictated by the seasons, with survival depending heavily on cooperation and the protection offered by the communal setting. As time passed, the separate communities began to form relationships, sometimes rivalrous, sometimes cooperative. Shared religious practices played a pivotal role in bringing them together. Ritual sites, altars, and early shrines were established on neutral or centrally located hills, such as the Capitoline, which became associated with state religion and divine oversight. The convergence of ritual and politics would later define Roman civic life. But even in its embryonic stages, spiritual observance served as a glue binding these disparate settlements together. A significant factor in the gradual coalescence of these hill communities was the practice of synoecism, the process of combining smaller communities into a single political entity. Though originally autonomous, the settlements found strength in unity, particularly when faced with common threats or opportunities. The need for collective defense against hostile neighbors, such as the Volsi or Aequi tribes, encouraged the pooling of resources, manpower, and leadership. This alliance was not always peaceful or voluntary. Local conflicts and power struggles marked the process, but over time, cooperation won out. The swampy lowland between the hills, what would become the Roman Forum, eventually transformed from a no man's land into a neutral ground. At first, it was an undesirable marsh, avoided due to frequent flooding and poor drainage. However, as engineering knowledge advanced and communal labor was organized, the land was gradually reclaimed. Drainage systems like the Cloaca Maxima, one of the earliest known sewer systems, enabled this transformation. Once dry and usable, the Forum evolved into the heart of Roman political, commercial, and judicial life, symbolizing the unification of the hills into a single community. As this union matured, governance structures began to take form. What may have started as loose coalitions of tribal leaders or chieftains gave way to more organized assemblies and proto-urban institutions. Decisions affecting all the hill settlements had to be made collectively, encouraging the development of forums, councils, and customary laws. While little written record exists from this early phase, the traditions passed down suggest a blending of legal codes, conflict resolution mechanisms, and rituals designed to reinforce unity. The kings of Rome, beginning with Romulus in the legendary tradition, may well have emerged as symbolic unifiers of these once fractured communities, representing a consolidation of power and identity. The integration of the Seven Hills also facilitated economic development. With improved security and coordination, trade networks flourished. The Tiber River became a lifeline, connecting the settlements with the wider Mediterranean world. Salt from the coastal flats, timber from the inland forests, and agricultural goods from the surrounding plains could now be traded more efficiently. This economic synergy helped ensure that no single hill or group could dominate entirely, encouraging a form of interdependence that fostered further unity. Culturally, The amalgamation of these early settlements also led to a fusion of myths and narratives that would later be enshrined in Roman literature and religion. Local legends of hilltop gods and spirits, ancestral founders, and heroic defenders were woven together into a grand narrative that celebrated common ancestry and divine favor. The myth of Romulus and Remus, for instance, while centered on the Palatine, incorporated elements familiar to multiple tribes: abandonment, survival, and destiny. Over time, such stories served not only to entertain but to legitimize the social and political order that emerged. By the end of the Regal period, the Seven Hills were no longer viewed as separate entities, but as parts of a single urban whole. Walls and roads connected them, temples and forums united them, and shared festivals and civic duties bound their inhabitants together. What had begun as scattered hilltop hamlets became the nucleus of a city that would eventually dominate the ancient world. The Romans never forgot their roots, however, and many of their traditions, processions, and political rites harken back to these formative days. Despite the mythologizing of this early period in later Roman literature, archaeological findings and historical reconstructions support the idea that Rome's development was neither spontaneous nor orchestrated by divine intervention. It was a slow, organic process shaped by environment, necessity, and human ingenuity. The Seven Hills provided the canvas, but it was the people, farmers, warriors, priests, traders, who painted the first strokes of what would become a masterpiece of civilization. In looking back at the origins of Rome through the lens of the Seven Hills, one is reminded not only of the geography, but of the spirit of convergence. These elevations, once standing apart, became the pillars of a community that prized resilience, adaptability, and unity in the face of uncertainty. The early settlements upon these hills may have been modest in size and ambition, but their legacy is monumental. They laid the physical and cultural groundwork for a city that would one day consider itself the center of the world. Through centuries of growth, conquest, and transformation, the memory of the Seven Hills endured, not merely as topographical features, but as enduring symbols of Rome's beginnings and the foundational unity from which its destiny arose. Rape of the Sabine women, founding through force. The story of the rape of the Sabine women is one of the most famous and tragic legends in the early history of Rome. It is a tale that explores the founding of the city, the complexities of its people, and the sacrifices made for the survival and expansion of the nascent Roman state. The event itself is said to have occurred shortly after the establishment of Rome, around 750 BCE, when the city was in its infancy, and its founder, Romulus, was faced with the pressing need to secure his growing community's future. Romulus, the legendary founder and first king of Rome, had established the city with a vision of creating a thriving, powerful state. However, despite the rapid growth of the settlement, there was one glaring problem: Rome lacked women. Without women, the population could not grow, and the survival of the fledgling state seemed precarious. Romulus understood the importance of securing wives for his people, but he also realized that the nearby cities, particularly the Sabines, would not willingly provide their daughters for marriage to the Romans. So Romulus devised a plan that would go down in history as both a necessary act of survival and a deeply controversial one. The Sabine women, the central figures in this infamous event, were members of a neighboring tribe, the Sabines, who lived just to the northeast of Rome. The relationship between the Romans and the Sabines was one of tenuous alliances and occasional hostility. Romulus, understanding that a direct request for marriage would likely be rejected, set out to orchestrate an event that would attract the Sabines to Rome under false pretenses. He invited them to a grand festival in honor of Neptune, god of the sea, which he hoped would attract people from neighboring tribes, including the Sabines. Romulus promised a celebration that would include games, feasting, and displays of strength. The Sabines, curious and unaware of the Romans' true intentions, accepted the invitation and arrived in large numbers. Once the Sabines were in Rome, the situation quickly escalated into a brutal and shocking turn of events. At a prearranged signal, the Roman men, led by Romulus, suddenly seized the women. The Roman soldiers, acting with ruthless efficiency, took the Sabine women by force, carrying them off to their homes and the homes of their families. This act, known as the Rape of the Sabine Women, was, in essence, an act of abduction. The women, taken from their homes and families, were forced into marriages with the Roman men. Some were even violently separated from their families and loved ones, while others were forced to accept their new roles in Roman society. This was, without question, an egregious violation of the women's autonomy, a fundamental betrayal of trust, and a deeply unsettling act of power. The motivations behind the rape of the Sabine women were complex. Romulus, faced with the need to secure the survival of Rome, saw this as an essential act of statecraft. In the early years of Rome's foundation, a lack of women meant that the population could not sustain itself. Without wives and mothers, there would be no future for Rome, and it would eventually perish. Romulus, in his desperation to build a lasting city and empire, may have seen this act as the only way to ensure that the city could grow and thrive. Yet, this act set the tone for Rome's early years, a city born from violence and deceit, where survival was prioritized over morality. In his eyes, the end justified the means. The immediate aftermath of the rape of the Sabine women was, predictably, filled with conflict and outrage. The Sabine men, upon discovering the abduction of their women, immediately mounted a military response. Led by King Titus Tatius, the Sabines marched toward Rome with the intention of recovering their women and punishing the Romans for their treachery. What followed was a series of skirmishes between the Romans and the Sabines, with the two sides facing off in fierce battles. The Roman army, bolstered by their recent acquisitions, fought valiantly to defend their new city. However, the situation reached a dramatic turning point when the Sabine women, now in the midst of their forced marriages, played a crucial role in ending the conflict. In a moment of surprising bravery and unity, the Sabine women, who had once been the victims of abduction, intervened in the ongoing battles. They threw themselves between the fighting men, imploring both sides to cease their fighting and consider the lives of their children and families. It was the women's appeal to both the Romans and the Sabines that led to a ceasefire, as their actions highlighted the futility of further bloodshed. The women, once victims of violence, became symbols of unity and peace. As a result of this intervention, Romulus and Titus Tatius, the Sabine king, reached an agreement. The Romans and the Sabines would unite, creating a stronger, more powerful nation that combined the strength and resources of both peoples. Romulus and Titus Tatius agreed to rule jointly, sharing the leadership of the combined city of Rome. The act of violence that had begun the city's foundation ultimately led to a more peaceful and cooperative resolution. The Sabine women, who had been at the heart of this conflict, were crucial in bringing about this peace, and they were celebrated as the mothers of the next generation of Romans. The rape of the Sabine women, while brutal and violent, marked a pivotal moment in Rome's early history. It was an event that shaped the city's character, demonstrating the lengths to which its founders were willing to go to ensure its survival. It was also a moment that highlighted the role of women in the formation of Rome's future, as the women who had been taken by force ultimately played a role in securing the city's unity and peace. Their story is a tragic one, but it also serves as a testament to the power of perseverance, unity, and the ability of individuals to change the course of history, even in the face of unimaginable violence. In the centuries that followed, the rape of the Sabine women became a symbol of both Rome's harsh beginnings and its capacity for transformation. It was a foundational myth that was passed down through generations, serving as a reminder of the sacrifices made in the name of Rome's survival. The story has been immortalized in art, literature, and historical accounts, ensuring that it would never be forgotten. The tale of the Sabine women, taken in violence and returned in peace, remains one of the most powerful stories of Rome's origin, a city born of both bloodshed and hope, where the future was forged through force, yet also tempered by the humanity of those who shaped it. The rape of the Sabine women remains a tale marked by contradictions. Violence intertwined with necessity, brutality juxtaposed against the unification of two distinct peoples. As the years passed, this event was not just remembered for the immediate bloodshed, but for the long-lasting effects it had on the Roman psyche and culture. The Sabine women, who had been forcibly taken, were not merely pawns in a historical narrative. but came to represent the complex relationship between domination and assimilation, between subjugation and the eventual embrace of the Roman state. Following the agreement between Romulus and Titus Tatius, the two rulers laid the foundation for a new, united Rome. The Sabine women, who had been central to the conflict, now played a role in solidifying this newfound alliance. Their children, born of the Roman men and Sabine women, symbolized the union of two cultures. The marriage between the two groups was not just a political move, but also a cultural merging, as the Sabines, once the enemies of Rome, were now assimilated into Roman society. This blend of customs, traditions, and languages created a new identity for the city, a Roman identity that would eventually dominate the Mediterranean world. However, the Sabine women, despite their essential role in this process, often remained silent figures in the historical narrative. Their personal trauma was often overshadowed by the broader political significance of the event. While their influence in calming the war between their families and the Romans was acknowledged, the emotional toll of their abduction and forced marriages was rarely explored in depth. Yet, their intervention during the battle serves as an early indication of the role women would play in shaping the course of Roman history, not as passive victims, but as active participants in the decisions that shaped the fate of the state. Over time, the tale of the rape of the Sabine women was retold not only as a foundational myth, but also as a cautionary tale. It highlighted the lengths to which the Romans would go to ensure their survival and the sacrifices they were willing to make, even if those sacrifices involved unspeakable acts of violence. The violence itself, shocking by modern standards, was seen by the early Romans as a necessary evil, an essential act of statecraft that ensured the city's expansion and the preservation of its people. Despite the harshness of the event, the Romans also saw it as a demonstration of their ability to unite and adapt. The narrative of the Sabine women's abduction and eventual reconciliation was an example of how Rome could absorb its enemies, turning conflict into cooperation. The story of the Sabine women, therefore, became not just one of violent conquest, but one of cultural integration and political pragmatism. Through the union of the Romans and the Sabines, the city of Rome grew stronger, both militarily and culturally. As generations passed, the event was memorialized in sculptures, paintings, and literature, becoming a cornerstone of Roman mythology. The famous sculptures of the rape of the Sabine women, created by renowned artists such as Gian Lorenzo Bernini, portray the intensity and brutality of the event, but they also capture the profound moment when the women intervened, symbolizing the shift from violence to peace. These artistic representations have contributed to the enduring legacy of the event, ensuring that it remained an essential part of Roman identity. In the broader context of Roman history, the rape of the Sabine women stands as a stark reminder of the city's early struggles, its foundation through conflict, and its eventual rise to greatness. It illustrates Rome's resilience in the face of adversity, its ability to turn enemies into allies, and the central role that women, despite their initial victimization, played in the formation of one of the world's most powerful empires. From monarchy to republic, the fall of the last king. The transition from monarchy to republic in ancient Rome was a pivotal moment in the history of Western civilization. The monarchy that had ruled Rome for centuries came to an end in 509 BCE, following a series of events that led to the overthrow of the last Roman king, Tarquinius Superbus, and the establishment of the Roman Republic. This transformation was not just a political shift, but a profound change in the values, structure, and dynamics of Roman society. The fall of the last king marked the end of royal rule and set in motion a new era of governance, characterized by shared power, elected officials, and the emergence of a system that would later influence the political systems of the modern world. The story of the fall of the monarchy begins with the reign of Tarquinius Superbus, the seventh and final king of Rome. His rule was marked by arrogance, cruelty, and a disregard for the traditional Roman values of justice and respect for the people. Tarquin's reign alienated both the nobility and the common citizens of Rome, but it was his behavior toward the Roman elite that ultimately sparked the rebellion that led to his overthrow. The king's decisions were not always guided by the will of the Senate, and his actions often insulted and disregarded the input of the Roman aristocracy. The turning point came with the tragic story of Lucretia, the wife of a Roman nobleman who was sexually assaulted by Tarquin's son, Sextus Tarquinius. Lucretia, a woman known for her virtue and honor, was so devastated by the violation that she took her own life, leaving behind a powerful and emotional message to her family and the Roman people. Before her death, she revealed the identity of her attacker to her husband, Lucius Junius Brutus, and her father, Spurius Lucretius. The outrage over Lucretia's death quickly spread through Rome, and the noble families of the city rallied behind the call for justice. Brutus, a relative of the royal family but a staunch opponent of tyranny, became the leader of the movement to overthrow the monarchy. He took an oath to never allow a king to rule Rome again, and along with a group of disillusioned nobles, he led a revolt against Tarquinius Superbus. In a remarkable show of unity, the Romans decided that the monarchy should be abolished entirely, and that no individual would ever hold the power of a king again. This was not just a revolt against one man, but against the very institution of monarchy that had defined Roman governance for centuries. As the Roman people rallied behind Brutus, the monarchy quickly crumbled. Tarquinius Superbus was forced to flee the city, and Rome became a republic. Brutus and his supporters established a new government based on shared power, with 2 consuls elected annually to serve as the highest authorities in the land. These consuls were expected to work together, ensuring that no single individual could gain the absolute power that had been held by the kings. The Senate, a body of Roman nobles, was also strengthened in the new republic, providing a check on the power of the consuls. This new form of government, while still in its infancy, was rooted in the idea of civic virtue and the belief that power should be in the hands of the people. The Roman Republic was not a democracy in the modern sense, but it was a system where the elites and the free citizens of Rome had a voice in their governance. The downfall of the monarchy led to the creation of a political system that was meant to balance power, prevent tyranny, and ensure that the decisions of the state were made by a collective body rather than a single ruler. The legacy of this transition is still felt today. The idea that power should be shared among elected officials, with checks and balances in place to prevent any one individual from gaining too much control, became a foundational principle of Western political thought. The Roman Republic, despite its flaws and eventual collapse into dictatorship under figures like Julius Caesar, influenced the development of republican systems of government in later civilizations, most notably in the formation of the United States. The fall of the monarchy in Rome also had deep social and cultural implications. With the end of the king's reign, the power of the aristocracy was solidified, and the plebeians, the common people of Rome, gained a more prominent role in the political system. While the early Roman Republic was still heavily influenced by the patrician class, the rise of the plebeians eventually led to a series of social and political reforms that further expanded the rights and influence of the common people. Over time, the plebeians gained more access to political offices, and the distinctions between patricians and plebeians began to blur, although class struggles continued throughout Roman history. In the aftermath of the monarchy's fall, Rome also turned inward to solidify its power and expand its influence. The early years of the Republic were marked by wars with neighboring tribes and states, as the Romans sought to defend their new political order and extend their influence across the Italian peninsula. This period of expansion eventually led to the rise of Rome as a dominant force in the Mediterranean world, with the Republic evolving into an empire in the centuries that followed. The legacy of the fall of the last king is also evident in the Roman dedication to law and order. The establishment of the Roman Republic was accompanied by the development of a written legal code, the 12 Tables, which outlined the rights and duties of Roman citizens. These laws were designed to ensure justice and fairness, and they formed the basis of Roman law, which has influenced legal systems around the world to this day. The transition from monarchy to republic was not a simple or smooth process. The early years of the Roman Republic were marked by internal struggles, wars, and political intrigue. However, the fundamental idea that power should be held by the people and that no one individual should have absolute control became a cornerstone of Roman identity. The fall of the last king marked the end of one era and the beginning of another, setting the stage for the rise of Rome as one of the greatest civilizations in history. In conclusion, the fall of the last Roman king and the transition from monarchy to republic was a defining moment in Roman history. It was a moment that altered the course of Western civilization and set the stage for the rise of republican ideals that would shape the modern world. Though the republic itself would eventually fall, the principles of shared power, the rule of law, and the importance of civic virtue remained central to the political systems that emerged from Rome's legacy. The fall of the last king was not just the end of a monarchy, but the birth of a political system that would leave a lasting impact on the history of the world. The transition from monarchy to republic also had a significant impact on Rome's military and governance structures. With the monarchy's collapse, the Roman military became more closely integrated with the republic's political framework. The military was no longer simply an instrument of a single ruler, but instead became a tool of the people. The consuls, who were elected by the citizens, would command the legions, ensuring that military power was held by those accountable to the people rather than a monarch who could abuse it. This shift was critical in fostering a sense of civic responsibility among Roman soldiers, who in turn felt their loyalty was owed not just to a king, but to the Roman state itself. The early republic faced numerous external threats, which required a strong and united military force. Rome, which had been a small city-state, now found itself in conflicts with neighboring Latin tribes, the Etruscans, and others. The military reforms introduced during this period emphasized discipline and strategic thinking, helping to build a reputation for Roman legions as formidable and effective forces. This military success laid the groundwork for Rome's future expansion and solidified the Republic's control over the Italian peninsula. The establishment of a professional army that was loyal to Rome, rather than any individual monarch, contributed significantly to the enduring stability of the Republic in its early centuries. In addition to military reforms, the political system of checks and balances developed in the Republic continued to evolve, with a focus on preventing the concentration of power in any one body or individual. The creation of the tribunes, officials who represented the plebeians, further ensured that the voice of the common people would not be ignored in the decision-making process. Over time, this system allowed the Roman Republic to thrive, even in the face of internal and external challenges, shaping the foundations of modern republican systems of governance. The role of augury and omens in Rome's birth. In ancient Rome, the role of augury and omens was integral to both the spiritual and political fabric of society. These practices were not seen merely as superstitions, but were woven into the daily life of Romans, influencing their decisions, actions, and beliefs. The Romans had a deep reverence for the will of the gods and sought guidance through various methods of divination, with augury being one of the most prominent forms. Augurs, priests dedicated to interpreting signs, played a vital role in ensuring that decisions, whether political, military, or social, aligned with divine approval. This belief in the power of the gods to influence human affairs was central to Roman life, and augury became a mechanism through which the divine was perceived to communicate with the mortal realm. The practice of augury, primarily concerned with the observation of the flight patterns of birds, was believed to reveal the god's favor or disapproval. If a bird flew in a specific direction, the augur would interpret it as a favorable sign. If it flew in the opposite direction, it would be considered an omen of misfortune. These signs could be highly specific, with the type of bird, the direction of its flight, and even the number of birds involved, all influencing the interpretation. The augur would carefully observe the bird's behavior, noting the timing and the circumstances under which the event occurred, to provide a reading that could guide political and military leaders. For the Romans, such signs were not just symbolic, they were tangible messages from the gods, meant to guide important decisions. The importance of augury was not confined to the political realm, but extended into the lives of ordinary citizens. When an individual or family faced a significant decision, such as embarking on a journey or starting a business, they might consult an augur to seek the god's guidance. In this sense, augury provided a kind of divine oversight, ensuring that the Romans believed they were in harmony with the cosmic order. This practice reinforced the idea that the gods were actively involved in the daily affairs of individuals and the state, and that their favor was essential for success and well-being. In addition to the augurs, the Roman state also placed significant importance on various forms of omens, including those seen in the natural world. Thunder, lightning, earthquakes, and unusual phenomena were all considered omens that could signal divine displeasure or approval. For example, a sudden, unexpected storm during a military campaign was seen as a sign that the gods were either assisting or hindering the Roman forces. Similarly, the sight of a comet was often interpreted as a divine signal of impending events, either positive or negative, such as the death of a ruler or the rise of a new power. Romans also believed that unusual birth defects or the death of unusual animals could portend future events, and these omens were meticulously recorded and interpreted by those trained in divination. One of the most notable examples of augury in Roman history is the founding of Rome itself. According to legend, Romulus and Remus, the twin brothers who were said to be the founders of the city, consulted augurs to determine the most auspicious location for the founding of the city. Romulus sought the approval of the gods by interpreting the flight of birds, and his success in this endeavor played a key role in his decision to establish Rome on the Palatine Hill. This mythological foundation story highlights the significance of augury as a crucial part of Rome's origins, signaling that the city's creation was not merely a human act, but a divine event, blessed by the gods. The importance of omens in Roman political life was also manifest in the election of officials and military leaders. Before taking office or leading troops into battle, leaders would often consult the gods to ensure that their actions would meet with divine approval. For example, the Roman Senate might delay an important decision or a military campaign if an unfavorable omen was observed. Such decisions were made to avoid offending the gods, as the consequences of their wrath were believed to be disastrous. The idea of divine favor or disfavor shaped not only the decisions of the elite, but also the daily conduct of Roman life, ensuring that individuals were mindful of the forces that lay beyond their control. Another aspect of Roman divination was the practice of haruspicy, which involved the reading of animal entrails. While distinct from augury, haruspicy was closely related and often used in conjunction with it. Priests would examine the organs of sacrificed animals, particularly the liver, to interpret the will of the gods. The color, shape, and condition of the liver were all believed to be indicative of the gods' mood and guidance. These practices further underscore the Romans' belief in the interconnectedness of the divine and the earthly realm. In every aspect of life, from politics to warfare to personal decisions, Romans sought the favor and approval of the gods, believing that their destinies were intertwined with the divine. The relationship between omens and Roman leadership is also evident in the actions of the generals and emperors. Julius Caesar, for example, is famously said to have ignored a warning from a soothsayer to beware the Ides of March. Despite the ominous prediction, Caesar continued with his plans, which ultimately led to his assassination. This story demonstrates that while omens were taken seriously, they were not always acted upon. Roman leaders, especially those with great power, might choose to ignore unfavorable omens if they believed that their personal ambitions or the demands of the state outweighed the warnings of the gods. However, ignoring omens often carried consequences, as the Roman people held their leaders accountable for any misfortune that befell the state. Throughout Rome's history, the role of augury and omens remained an enduring aspect of its culture. Even as Rome grew from a small city-state into a vast empire, the belief in divine signs continued to shape the actions of its leaders and citizens. The idea that the gods communicated through omens reinforced the Roman worldview, where human actions were constantly subject to the will of the gods. This sense of divine oversight provided a sense of order and control in a world that was often unpredictable and chaotic. The fall of Rome also witnessed the continued relevance of augury and omens. As the empire declined and faced internal strife, leaders and citizens alike turned to the gods for guidance, hoping for signs that might reverse the empire's fortunes. In the final days of Rome, the practice of divination became intertwined with the search for answers to the empire's troubles, as individuals sought to interpret the omens that might explain the challenges they faced. In conclusion, augury and omens were not mere superstitions in ancient Rome. They were deeply ingrained practices that shaped political, military, and social life. Through augurs and other forms of divination, the Romans sought to align themselves with the will of the gods, believing that divine favor was necessary for success. The influence of augury extended to the founding of Rome itself and remained a guiding force throughout its history, reflecting the profound connection between the divine and the mortal in Roman thought. This relationship between the gods and the Romans highlights the importance of fate, destiny, and divine guidance in shaping the course of human events. Rome and Alba Longa, the forgotten rival. The ancient history of Rome is often celebrated, with grand stories of its founders, its rise to power, and the eventual domination of the Mediterranean world. However, one of its earliest and most significant rivals has faded into the background of history: Alba Longa. The story of Alba Longa is essential in understanding the formation of Rome and the intricate relationships between the early Latin cities. Nestled in the Alban Hills, Alba Longa was not just a neighboring settlement, but a powerful and proud city-state that challenged the future of Rome long before it became the center of an empire. Alba Longa's significance lies in its role as the ancestral homeland of Rome's legendary founders, Romulus and Remus. According to myth, the city was established by Ascanius, the son of Aeneas, the Trojan hero, who is often regarded as the ancestor of the Roman people. This connection provided Alba Longa with both prestige and power within the early Latin League, an alliance of communities that sought mutual defense and stability. For centuries, Alba Longa was a central figure in the history of Latium, the region surrounding the future Rome. The rivalry between Rome and Alba Longa is most clearly illustrated in the legendary conflict that culminated in the war between the two cities. The two were bound by a shared heritage and language, yet a deep and growing tension began to brew between them. At the heart of the dispute was the competition for dominance in the region. Alba Longa had long been the most influential city of the Latin League, but with the rise of Rome, a new power emerged that threatened to usurp Alba Longa's position. As Rome's influence expanded, so did its ambitions. The city was growing rapidly, and its political structure began to take shape, driven by the ambitions of its leaders and the unity of its citizens. In contrast, Alba Longa struggled to maintain its status in the face of this rising rival. The conflict between the two cities reached its peak when a war broke out, the causes of which remain shrouded in legend and historical ambiguity. One of the most famous stories from this time is the battle between the Horizii, the champions of Rome, and the Curiatii, the champions of Alba Longa. According to tradition, the two cities agreed to settle their dispute through a trial of champions. 3 brothers from each city, the Horizii and the Curiatii, would fight to the death in single combat, with the outcome determining the fate of the cities. The Romans, led by the Horizii, emerged victorious, but the aftermath of the battle marked the beginning of the end for Alba Longa. Although the city had lost the war, it still held an important place in the Latin world, and its fall was not immediate. The Roman victory led to the eventual annexation of Alba Longa. The city's fate was sealed when the Romans decided to destroy it as a political entity. The destruction of Alba Longa marked a crucial moment in Roman history, as it signified the consolidation of Rome's power in the region. The Roman leadership, in a pragmatic yet ruthless move, chose to relocate the citizens of Alba Longa to Rome, effectively absorbing them into the growing city-state. The downfall of Alba Longa is often seen as the final chapter in the city's once prominent history. However, it is also a symbol of Rome's relentless drive to expand and dominate. Alba Longa's annexation helped solidify Rome's influence over the Latin League, and in the centuries that followed, Rome would continue to grow in power, eventually becoming the heart of the Roman Empire. Yet, the legacy of Alba Longa persisted in the form of its people and its contributions to Roman culture. Alba Longa's role in the early history of Rome was crucial. The city's rich heritage provided Rome with much of its early traditions, including its religious practices and political structures. Many of the early Roman kings were believed to have been from Alba Longa, and the city's royal bloodlines were revered by the Romans. Additionally, the Alban Hills, with their religious significance, remained important for centuries, providing a backdrop for the future expansion of Roman religious practices. In examining the forgotten rivalry between Rome and Alba Longa, we are reminded that the history of Rome's rise to power was not inevitable. It was the product of centuries of competition, conflict, and assimilation. The destruction of Alba Longa was not the end of the Latin League, but rather the beginning of Rome's domination of the region. Alba Longa's story serves as a testament to the complex and often violent history of the early Roman world, where cities rose and fell in pursuit of power and influence. Alba Longa's legacy, though diminished over time, lives on in the cultural and political foundation it helped lay for Rome. The city-state may have been absorbed into Rome, but its contributions were not lost. The stories, traditions, and memories of Alba Longa continued to shape the identity of the Roman people for generations. The city's fall marked the end of one era, but it also marked the beginning of another, an era in which Rome would rise to unprecedented heights. Despite its role in the early history of Rome, Alba Longa's story remains largely overshadowed by the grandeur of the Roman Empire. Yet, it is crucial to recognize the importance of this forgotten rival. Without Alba Longa, there may have been no Rome as we know it today. The rivalry between the two cities, though brief, set the stage for the future of the ancient world, influencing the course of history for centuries to come. In the end, the story of Alba Longa serves as a reminder that even the most powerful civilizations were once built on the struggles and conflicts of smaller, lesser-known cities. The rivalry between Rome and Alba Longa may have been forgotten, but its legacy lives on in the foundations of Roman society. The people of Alba Longa, though incorporated into Rome, left behind a lasting impact on the culture, religion, and politics of the city. And so, while their city may have faded into history, the influence of Alba Longa continues to echo through the annals of Roman history, a quiet but enduring reminder of the city that once stood as Rome's greatest rival. The fall of Alba Longa also had significant consequences for the political structure of Rome and the broader Latin region. As Rome absorbed the population of Alba Longa, the city-state's demise symbolized a shift in the balance of power in the region. The Romans, now the dominant force, utilized their conquest as a springboard for further expansion. They also capitalized on the leadership vacuum left by Alba Longa's collapse, forging ahead with their vision of a unified Latin world under Roman leadership. This period of consolidation saw the gradual expansion of Roman influence beyond the Alban Hills. The annexation of Alba Longa was not just a military victory, it was also a cultural and political one. The Roman Republic, even in its early stages, began to shape its identity as a unifying force in Latium. With the incorporation of Alba Longa's population, Rome added significant manpower to its ranks, as well as important connections to other Latin cities. This broadened Rome's ability to dominate local politics and extended its influence over the rest of the Latin League. Roman expansion was not merely about territorial conquest. It was also about integrating other Latin cities into the fold, ensuring their loyalty through strategic alliances and the promise of shared power. The Romans understood that the key to maintaining control over Latium lay not just in military prowess, but in their ability to convince their neighbors of the benefits of Roman leadership. Thus, after the destruction of Alba Longa, Rome sought to establish a more centralized and cooperative Latin League, one that was largely under its control. This tactic ensured that future rivals were either absorbed or neutralized, preventing them from becoming significant threats to Rome's growing power. Furthermore, the fall of Alba Longa marked an important shift in Rome's religious landscape. The integration of Alba Longa's citizens and traditions had a lasting impact on Roman religion, which absorbed several elements of the older city's rituals. The Alban Hills, once home to the powerful city-state, continued to hold religious significance for the Romans. The worship of Juno, the protector of the city, was particularly important and became a major part of Roman religious practice. This transition reflects the seamless blending of the two cultures. Rome absorbed not only the physical remnants of Alba Longa, but also its spiritual and cultural traditions. The military and religious success of the Romans in the aftermath of Alba Longa's destruction set the stage for the city's further dominance. The absence of any formidable rivals in the region allowed Rome to assert its leadership more firmly and to extend its control across Italy. Over time, the Romans established a network of alliances with neighboring cities, further cementing their role as the preeminent power in the region. Rome's defeat of Alba Longa, although a singular event in history, had profound long-term effects on the political and cultural development of the Roman Republic. The absorption of Alba Longa's people also highlighted an early example of Roman pragmatism. Rather than obliterating the city and leaving a legacy of animosity, Rome chose to incorporate the survivors, giving them a stake in the city's future. This tactic helped ensure that there was no mass uprising or resistance against Roman rule. The integration of Alba Longa's citizens into the Roman fold provided a model for Rome's future expansionist policies, which often relied on the blending of conquered peoples into Roman society, a practice that would define Roman imperialism for centuries. In the end, while Alba Longa's name has largely faded from history, its role in shaping Rome cannot be underestimated. The city, once a thriving power in its own right, became a stepping stone in Rome's journey to greatness. Its downfall helped solidify the idea of Rome as the central force in Latium and later the Mediterranean world. The legacy of Alba Longa, therefore, lives on in the very fabric of Roman society, its influence continuing to shape Roman politics, culture, and religion in subtle yet significant ways. Tarquins and tyranny, lessons from the kings. The Tarquins were one of the most influential and controversial dynasties in early Roman history. They represented the final phase of the Roman kingdom, a time when Rome was ruled by kings before it transitioned into a republic. The lessons learned from their reign are crucial for understanding the rise of tyranny, the downfall of monarchy, and the establishment of a political system based on checks and balances. While their rule is often seen as a period of growing corruption and power struggles, it also highlights important themes that resonate even in modern governance. The Tarquins came to power in the early 6th century BCE, with Tarquinius Priscus as the first king of the dynasty. His rise to power was not a smooth one. Born as an outsider, he came from the Etruscan city of Tarquini, and his ascent was largely due to his charisma, military skill, and political maneuvering. His reign saw significant military victories that expanded Roman territory, as well as major building projects, including the construction of the Cloaca Maxima, Rome's first great sewer system. While his achievements were significant, his method of gaining and maintaining power set a precedent for future rulers who prioritized their personal power over the welfare of the people. The Tarquin dynasty's importance lies not only in the actions of the kings, but in the lessons their rule imparted on future generations. Tarquinius Priscus laid the groundwork for a period of expansion and consolidation, but his eventual assassination marked the beginning of the more tyrannical nature of the kings that followed. The rise of Tarquinius Superbus, or Tarquin the Proud, brought Rome to the brink of absolute monarchy. Under his reign, the line between monarchy and tyranny became blurred. Superbus's rule was marked by increasing despotism, where the king's authority was unquestioned, and the rights of the Roman people were systematically undermined. He ruled without the consent of the Senate, and his actions were frequently described as cruel and arbitrary. Tarquinius Superbus's behavior led to widespread dissatisfaction among the Roman nobility and the people. The most infamous incident during his reign was the rape of Lucretia, the noble woman whose tragic death sparked the revolt that ultimately led to the overthrow of the monarchy. The rape of Lucretia was not just a personal tragedy, but a symbol of the monarchy's moral decay. Her death served as the catalyst for the revolution that ended the Roman kingdom and paved the way for the establishment of the Roman Republic. The lessons of this period are still relevant today, as they highlight the dangers of unchecked power and the consequences of a ruler who loses sight of the public good. The overthrow of the Tarquins marks one of the most important turning points in Roman history. It was not merely the removal of a tyrannical king, but the rejection of the very idea of monarchy in favor of a system of governance that would allow for the representation of the people and the control of power through shared institutions. This shift was monumental because it set the foundation for the Roman Republic, which would last for several centuries and influence future political systems, including modern democracies. The Roman Republic was built on the lessons learned from the Tarquin monarchy. One of the key principles that emerged from the fall of the monarchy was the importance of balancing power. The Roman Republic was designed to prevent any one individual from gaining too much power. The Senate, the consuls, and other political institutions were created to ensure that no one person could dominate the political system as the Tarquins had. The creation of these checks and balances was a direct response to the tyranny of the Tarquins, and it provided a framework for governance that emphasized collaboration, representation, and accountability. The downfall of the Tarquins also had significant social and cultural implications. It marked the end of the Roman kingdom and the beginning of a new era where the values of the Republic were emphasized. The idea of shared political responsibility, where no one individual had the right to rule without accountability, became central to Roman identity. The Romans learned from the mistakes of the Tarquins, and these lessons would influence the development of Roman political thought for centuries to come. The lessons from the Tarquins also extend beyond politics into the realm of leadership. Tarquin the Proud, in particular, serves as a warning about the corrupting influence of absolute power. His downfall was not inevitable. It was the result of his inability to listen to others, his reliance on violence and manipulation, and his refusal to compromise. These are traits that have been observed in many autocratic leaders throughout history, and they remain as relevant today as they were in ancient Rome. The story of the Tarquins is not just a cautionary tale about the dangers of monarchy and tyranny. It is also a reflection on the nature of power and the responsibilities that come with it. The Tarquins' failure to recognize the importance of accountability, transparency, and the rule of law led to their downfall. In many ways, their reigns serve as a mirror to our own political systems, reminding us that power must be exercised with care and in service to the people, not for personal gain. Furthermore, the impact of the Tarquins on Roman culture and society cannot be understated. Their rule shaped the development of Roman institutions and values, which would have a lasting influence on Western civilization. The emphasis on civic duty, the importance of public service, and the need for political accountability all emerged as a response to the tyranny of the Tarquins. These principles were not just theoretical, but were embedded in the practices of Roman life, from the Roman Senate to the legal system, and they would continue to shape the Western world long after the fall of the Roman Empire. The lessons of the Tarquin monarchy have echoes in modern political systems. In particular, they offer a warning about the dangers of centralized power and the need for mechanisms of accountability. The fall of the Tarquins is a story of revolution, but it is also a story of renewal. The Roman Republic that emerged from their downfall was not perfect, and it too would experience corruption, factionalism, and internal strife. However, it laid the foundation for the development of a political system that valued the rights of citizens and sought to prevent the rise of tyranny. In conclusion, the reign of the Tarquins provides valuable lessons in governance, leadership, and the nature of power. Their story teaches us about the importance of balancing authority with responsibility, the dangers of unchecked power, and the need for political systems that reflect the will of the people. The fall of the Tarquins marked the end of one era and the beginning of another, but the lessons of their reign continue to resonate in the political systems we use today. As we look to the future, we must remember the story of the Tarquins and the lessons they imparted to Rome, and to all those who seek to understand the nature of political power and leadership. The legacy of the Tarquin monarchy extends far beyond their rule itself, shaping Roman political structures and influencing future generations of Roman leaders. The revolt that ended their dynasty was not merely the result of a single political incident, but the culmination of years of growing dissatisfaction with their despotic rule. The transition from monarchy to the Roman Republic signified not only a shift in governance, but a fundamental transformation in Roman values and political culture. Following the expulsion of the Tarquins, the Roman Republic was born out of the ashes of monarchy, with the creation of a political system designed to prevent the rise of another autocrat. The foundation of the Republic was built on the belief that power should be shared, decentralized, and checked by the will of the people. The overthrow of the Tarquins highlighted the dangers of unchecked authority, and the Romans were keen to establish mechanisms that would ensure a government that reflected the interests and rights of the citizens, rather than the whims of a monarch. One of the most important reforms that emerged in the wake of the Tarquin monarchy was the institution of consuls, the chief magistrates of the Roman Republic. Consuls were elected by the people, and their powers were limited by term lengths, which prevented any single individual from accumulating too much influence. The consuls were responsible for the administration of justice, military command, and the execution of laws, but they were bound by the constraints of law and accountability to the Senate and the people. This shift was a direct response to the concentrated power that had been wielded by the Tarquins and their predecessors. The Roman Senate, composed of aristocratic families, also played a crucial role in the new political system. The Senate acted as an advisory body to the consuls and held significant influence over policymaking, particularly in matters of foreign affairs, military strategy, and legislation. The Senate's power was not absolute, however, and its authority was balanced by the tribunes of the plebs, who were elected representatives of the common people. The tribunes had the ability to veto actions that they deemed harmful to the plebeians, ensuring that the lower classes had a voice in the governance of the republic. This system of checks and balances was designed to prevent any one faction from gaining too much power, a lesson that had been learned from the autocratic rule of the Tarquins. The transition to a republic also introduced a more complex legal system. Roman law, which would go on to influence legal systems in the Western world for centuries, was established in part as a safeguard against tyranny. The 12 Tables, created in the mid-5th century BCE, represented a codification of laws that applied equally to all Roman citizens, regardless of their social class. The codification of laws ensured that rulers could no longer make arbitrary decisions without facing legal repercussions. This was in stark contrast to the arbitrary rule of the Tarquins, whose decisions were often based on personal whim rather than reason or justice. Beyond the structural changes to governance, the overthrow of the Tarquins also had a profound impact on Roman culture and identity. The Republic's founding myths, including the stories of the founding of Rome by Romulus and Remus, served to reinforce the ideals of civic duty, bravery, and the rejection of tyranny. The Roman people, united by their rejection of the Tarquin monarchy, saw themselves as protectors of freedom who had fought to eliminate the dangers of absolute power. This shared sense of purpose and identity was crucial in the early years of the Republic, as it helped to foster a spirit of cooperation and mutual responsibility. The story of the Tarquins also provided the Romans with a powerful symbol of the dangers of ambition and unchecked power. The Tarquins were often depicted as exemplars of tyrannical behavior, with their personal desires and lust for power coming at the expense of the people they ruled. Tarquin the Proud, in particular, became a symbol of the corrupting influence of power. His reign was characterized by an increasing disregard for the welfare of the Roman citizens and a growing sense of entitlement to absolute authority. His downfall, however, demonstrated the resilience of the Roman people and their determination to restore balance to their political system. One of the lasting lessons of the Tarquin monarchy is the understanding that no leader, regardless of their accomplishments or heritage, is immune from the consequences of misrule. The Tarquins, despite their military victories and contributions to the development of Rome, were ultimately undone by their inability to govern justly. Tarquin the Proud's downfall was not merely a result of his cruelty, but also of his isolation from the people he ruled. He became disconnected from the needs and desires of the Roman populace, relying instead on fear and violence to maintain control. In doing so, he alienated the very people who had once supported the monarchy, leaving him vulnerable to revolt. The fall of the Tarquins also highlights the importance of political legitimacy. While the Tarquins initially rose to power through strategic alliances and military successes, their reign ultimately faltered because they failed to secure the support of the people. Tarquin the Proud's disregard for public sentiment and his increasing reliance on autocratic methods of rule were key factors in the erosion of his authority. The establishment of the Republic, by contrast, emphasized the importance of legitimacy derived from the consent of the governed. In this new political order, the people's will became the ultimate source of authority, and the rulers were accountable to the citizens they governed. The story of the Tarquins also underscores the importance of resilience in the face of adversity. While the overthrow of the monarchy was a dramatic and violent event, it was ultimately a triumph of the Roman people's determination to protect their political system from tyranny. The revolt against the Tarquins was not just a reaction to a specific act of injustice, such as the rape of Lucretia, but also a broader rejection of the idea that any one individual or family should have the power to rule without accountability. This sense of collective agency and determination would become a defining characteristic of the Roman Republic, which would go on to shape the political landscape of the Western world for centuries. The lessons of the Tarquins are as relevant today as they were in ancient Rome. In modern political systems, the dangers of unchecked power and the corruption of authority remain pressing concerns. The story of the Tarquins serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of maintaining a political system that values transparency, accountability, and the rule of law. It also highlights the need for leaders to remain connected to the people they serve and to govern in a way that is consistent with the public good. In conclusion, the reign of the Tarquins serves as both a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration for future generations. Their downfall demonstrated the dangers of autocratic rule and the corrupting influence of absolute power. However, their expulsion also marked the beginning of a new era in Roman history, and one in which the principles of shared power, accountability, and civic duty would be enshrined in the fabric of Roman society. The lessons learned from the Tarquins would continue to influence Roman governance for centuries, and their legacy would leave a lasting imprint on the development of political systems across the globe. Rome's first laws, foundations of order. The origins of Roman law are deeply intertwined with the development of the city itself, shaping not only its legal system, but also its culture and identity. The earliest foundations of law in Rome were born from necessity, as the growing settlement faced the challenge of organizing a rapidly expanding society. Before the establishment of formalized written codes, Roman law was passed down orally and through traditions that were influenced by the customs of the Etruscans and other neighboring civilizations. Early Roman laws were not just a set of rules. They were integral to the Roman ethos of civic duty and the maintenance of order, justice, and collective responsibility. The first major written laws in Rome were introduced around the mid-5th century BCE in what is known as the Leges Duodecim Tabularum, or the 12 Tables. These laws are regarded as the foundation of Roman legal thought and provided the basis for much what would evolve into the Roman Republic's intricate legal system. The 12 Tables were created after years of social unrest and demands by the plebeians for transparency and protection against the arbitrary power of the patricians, the ruling class of the early Republic. Before the creation of the 12 Tables, the plebeians were at a distinct disadvantage because they had no written laws to refer to and were often subject to the whims of patrician magistrates. By demanding written laws, the plebeians sought to ensure fairness and equality under the law, a critical turning point in Rome's legal evolution. The 12 Tables were not just a single set of rules, but rather a series of legal norms inscribed on 12 bronze tablets that were publicly displayed in the Roman Forum for all to see. This was done to ensure that everyone, regardless of social class, could have access to the laws and understand their rights and responsibilities. The laws themselves were highly detailed and dealt with a wide range of topics, including family relations, property rights, legal procedure, and crimes. They sought to establish a level of social order and protect the rights of individuals, including slaves and women, although the laws were heavily skewed in favor of male citizens. One of the significant aspects of the 12 tables was the notion of equitas, the principle of fairness and equality before the law. This concept would later evolve into a cornerstone of Roman legal philosophy, influencing the development of modern Western legal traditions. The tables also laid the groundwork for the Roman legal notion that laws should apply universally, rather than being subject to the whims of individual rulers or magistrates. For instance, under the 12 tables, the law was applied equally to all citizens, regardless of their social standing, though the plebeians were still disadvantaged in many areas. Nevertheless, the notion that laws should be accessible to the public marked a revolutionary shift from the more arbitrary systems of law that existed in many ancient cultures. However, while the 12 tables provided a solid legal foundation, they were by no means a perfect system. They were a compromise, an attempt to address the most pressing social inequalities of the time. The laws had their flaws, especially in areas concerning the treatment of slaves and the harsh penalties imposed for certain crimes. They were also somewhat rigid and inflexible, unable to easily adapt to the changing needs of a growing empire. Over time, as Rome expanded and faced new challenges, the legal system needed to evolve, leading to the development of more sophisticated legal theories and practices. In addition to the 12 tables, the development of Roman law was further shaped by the establishment of various magistracies and the gradual shift toward a more codified system of governance. The praetors, who were elected officials responsible for administering justice, played a pivotal role in this evolution. They had the authority to issue edicta, which were legal pronouncements that provided additional guidance on how to interpret and apply the law in specific cases. Over time, these edicts became increasingly important as they allowed for greater flexibility in the application of the law, reflecting the changing circumstances of Roman society. One of the most enduring contributions of Roman law was the concept of jurisprudence, the study and interpretation of the law. Roman jurists developed an elaborate system of legal reasoning where they would analyze cases and interpret the intent behind the laws. This intellectual tradition, which was carried on through the writings of prominent jurists like Gaius, Ulpian, and Papinian, became a critical component of Roman legal practice. Their works would later serve as the foundation for much of modern civil law systems, particularly in Europe. The Roman legal system was not static. It continuously adapted to meet the demands of an ever-expanding empire. As Rome conquered new territories, the need for a unified legal system that could accommodate the diverse cultures, customs, and traditions of its provinces became increasingly important. The Romans introduced the idea of ius gentium, or the law of nations, which governed the relationships between different peoples and territories within the empire. This legal framework was based on universal principles of justice and fairness, which could be applied across cultures, and was essential to maintaining the stability of the empire. By the 2nd century BCE, Roman law had evolved to include more complex legal principles, such as the concept of contractus, contracts, actio, actions, and delictum, torts. These concepts laid the groundwork for the legal frameworks of modern commercial and civil law. Roman law also influenced the development of the Corpus Juris Civilis, a monumental compilation of legal texts commissioned by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian in the 6th century CE. This collection of laws and legal principles would go on to shape the legal systems of many modern nations and remain a cornerstone of Western legal thought. In conclusion, the 12 tables and the early foundations of Roman law marked a significant turning point in the development of legal systems. They laid the groundwork for the principles of justice, equality, and fairness that would continue to evolve throughout Roman history and would eventually influence the legal systems of much of the world. The Roman legal tradition, with its emphasis on written law, legal reasoning, and universal justice, remains one of the most enduring legacies of ancient Rome. As Rome grew from a small city-state to a vast empire, its legal system grew alongside it, adapting to the challenges of an ever-changing world. The Roman approach to law, with its commitment to fairness and the rule of law, continues to resonate in legal systems around the world today, making the foundations of Roman law as relevant now as they were 2 millennia ago. As Roman law continued to evolve, It not only became a tool for governance, but also a symbol of Roman civilization's commitment to order and justice. The development of Roman law was marked by a series of reforms and innovations, which gradually expanded the rights and responsibilities of citizens while maintaining the necessary social order. These changes were often driven by the increasing complexity of Roman society as it grew into a massive empire, where issues of governance, citizenship, and the administration of justice required a more detailed and organized legal framework. One of the most significant developments in Roman law was the concept of civil law, jus civile, which referred to the legal system governing Roman citizens. This system was primarily concerned with private law, addressing issues such as property rights, contracts, family law, and inheritance. It was a system that applied exclusively to Roman citizens, and its rules were often stricter and more formal than those found in the provinces. The codification of civil law helped to unify Roman society and create a sense of continuity and stability amidst the ever-changing circumstances of daily life. The jus civile was complemented by another essential part of the Roman legal system, jus gentium, the law of nations. This body of law governed the relationships between Rome and foreign peoples, offering a more flexible set of rules that could be applied to a wider array of situations. The jus gentium was particularly important as Rome expanded its territories and interacted with various cultures. It allowed the Roman Empire to maintain peaceful relations with its provinces and other kingdoms, while also providing a means for resolving disputes between different legal traditions. In many ways, the jus gentium was a precursor to modern international law, establishing the idea that certain fundamental principles of justice should be universal and applicable to all peoples, regardless of their specific customs. The role of the praetor became increasingly important in Roman law, especially as the complexity of legal issues grew. The praetor was a magistrate responsible for administering justice in Rome and its provinces, but his authority extended far beyond simple adjudication. The praetor had the power to issue edicta, or judicial pronouncements, which guided the application of the law. These edicts were a vital component of the Roman legal system, as they helped to fill in gaps where the law was ambiguous, silent. Over time, the edicts became a significant part of Roman jurisprudence, providing greater flexibility in the legal process. Roman law also placed great emphasis on legal procedure. The Roman legal system was not just about the laws themselves, but also about how they were applied in practice. Legal procedures in Rome were highly formalized, with specific rules governing everything from the conduct of trials to the presentation of evidence. The importance of procedural fairness in Roman law cannot be overstated, as it was seen as an essential part of ensuring that justice was done. Even though Roman law could be rigid and sometimes harsh, it was underpinned by the belief that due process was crucial for maintaining the integrity of the legal system. As the Roman Empire expanded, so too did the influence of its legal system. Roman law began to spread across the empire, providing a common legal framework that united a vast and diverse array of peoples. While local customs and traditions remained important in many provinces, Roman law provided a sense of uniformity and fairness, particularly in matters of governance and legal administration. Over time, Roman law became not only a tool of imperial control, but also a means of integrating various cultures into the Roman system. In the provinces, local elites often embraced Roman law as a way to gain favor with the imperial authorities, further embedding Roman legal principles into the fabric of society. The lasting impact of Roman law can be seen in its influence on the development of modern legal systems. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the legal principles enshrined in Roman law continued to shape the development of European legal traditions. In the medieval period, scholars rediscovered the works of Roman jurists, and their ideas influenced the development of canon law and later civil law. The Corpus Juris Civilis, compiled under the Byzantine Emperor Justinian in the 6th century CE, became the foundation of legal scholarship in Europe and the basis for much of the legal systems in continental Europe today. The concepts of property rights, contracts, and torts, fundamental elements of Roman law, remain integral to modern legal systems, showing the enduring legacy of Roman legal thought. In conclusion, the evolution of Roman law from the 12 tables to the complex body of legal theory and practice that emerged over centuries, played a critical role in the development of Roman civilization and its imperial structure. The principles of fairness, equality, and due process embedded in Roman law laid the groundwork for modern legal systems, making Roman law one of the most influential and enduring legacies of the ancient world. Even as the Roman Empire collapsed and gave way to new political entities, the core ideas of Roman law continued to shape the course of legal history, echoing through the ages and leaving an indelible mark on the legal systems that followed. The Tiber River, lifeline of a civilization. The Tiber River, winding through the heart of Italy, has long been a symbol of life and sustenance for the city of Rome. From its humble beginnings in the Apennine Mountains, it traverses the Italian landscape, carving a path through lush plains and eventually spilling into the Tyrrhenian Sea. But the Tiber was more than just a river. It was the lifeblood of a civilization that would go on to shape the future of the Western world. It was both a physical and symbolic force, shaping the development of the city of Rome and its transformation from a small settlement to the epicenter of an empire that spanned vast swaths of the ancient world. The role of the Tiber River in Rome's founding is deeply intertwined with myth and history. According to legend, the river played a pivotal role in the story of Romulus and Remus, the twin brothers raised by a she-wolf who would later become the founders of Rome. The river, with its flowing waters, became both a protector and a provider. It is said that the twins were left to die by the river, but were instead saved and nurtured by the she-wolf, marking the river as a place of rebirth and destiny. Even in this mythic tale, the Tiber is not merely a geographical feature, but a symbol of the promise and future of Rome. Historically, the Tiber was more than a backdrop to Rome's legendary birth. It was essential to the city's survival and prosperity. In the early days of Rome, the river served as a natural barrier, helping to protect the settlement from foreign invaders. Its banks were easily defended, and the river itself became a strategic waterway that enabled trade and communication. The Tiber was Rome's primary trade route, facilitating the movement of goods from all over the Mediterranean world. Ships laden with grain, wine, oil, and other essentials would navigate its waters, bringing life-sustaining resources to the burgeoning population of the city. As Rome grew, so too did the significance of the Tiber. It was not just a means of transportation and trade, but a central feature of Roman urban planning. The river bisected the city, providing a natural division between the Palatine and Capitoline Hills, two of the city's key geographical features. Bridges, some of which still stand today, were built to span the Tiber, enabling easy access across the city and creating a physical connection between the different districts. These bridges became vital to the flow of the city, and as Rome expanded, the river continued to play an indispensable role in its growth. Beyond its physical importance, the Tiber River also carried with it a sense of cultural and religious significance. The Romans viewed their river not simply as a waterway, but as a divine entity in its own right. The river was believed to be inhabited by a spirit, the Tiberinus, who was worshipped by the people. To the Romans, the river's ebb and flow represented the cycles of life and death, of creation and destruction. Rituals were held along its banks to honor the Tiber, and sacrifices were made to ensure that the river would continue to provide for the city. The river's divine status was reinforced by the construction of shrines and temples near its banks, underscoring its importance not only as a lifeline for the city, but as a spiritual symbol. Rome's relationship with the Tiber was not always harmonious, and the river's unpredictable nature could also pose a danger. Flooding was a constant threat, and over the centuries, the city experienced many catastrophic floods that caused widespread damage. In some instances, the Tiber would overflow its banks, submerging parts of the city and destroying homes, markets, and crops. The devastation caused by these floods was a reminder of the river's power, one that could both nurture and destroy. In response, the Romans constructed embankments and levees to try to control the flow of the river, though the battle against flooding was an ongoing struggle. In addition to its strategic and cultural significance, the Tiber was central to Rome's agricultural economy. The fertile plains surrounding the river were ideal for farming, and the river provided a steady supply of water for irrigation. The lands along the Tiber were rich in natural resources, allowing Rome to develop a robust agricultural base that supported its growing population. Farmers used the river not just for irrigation, but as a means of transport for their produce, bringing grains, vegetables, and fruits into the heart of the city for sale. The Tiber's role in this agricultural economy was essential to Rome's prosperity, and it was a key factor in the city's ability to sustain itself and its expanding empire. The Tiber River also played a significant role in Roman military strategy. As Rome's empire expanded, the Tiber became a crucial waterway for the movement of troops and military supplies. Roman legions, traveling by land and water, would use the Tiber to launch campaigns against neighboring tribes and states. The river facilitated the rapid movement of soldiers and equipment, ensuring that the Roman military machine could strike quickly and effectively. Additionally, the river served as a line of communication, allowing commanders to issue orders and coordinate military activities across the empire. In the centuries following the fall of the Roman Empire, the Tiber continued to serve as an important feature of Rome's urban landscape. During the medieval and Renaissance periods, the river was again seen as both a source of life and a powerful symbol of Rome's enduring legacy. Its role in the city's identity was reinforced by the construction of new bridges, as well as the ongoing use of its waters for trade, transportation, and agriculture. Even as the city's political and cultural focus shifted, the Tiber remained a constant presence, a living testament to Rome's long and storied history. Today, the Tiber River continues to flow through Rome, its waters carrying with them the echoes of centuries of history. While modern infrastructure and technology have changed the way the city operates, the river remains a vital part of Rome's identity. It serves as a reminder of the city's ancient origins, of the connection between nature and civilization, and of the enduring legacy of Rome as a world-changing power. The Tiber River is not just a body of water. It is a symbol of the rise and fall of empires, the lifeblood of a civilization that shaped the course of history. As the centuries have passed, the Tiber has also become a focal point for art and literature, with its iconic presence inspiring countless works throughout history. Poets and authors have found in its waters a metaphor for the passage of time and the unyielding flow of history. The river, with its timeless course, has been seen as both a witness to the rise of empires and the decay of civilizations, its waters reflecting the ever-changing tides of Rome itself. Artists, too, have drawn inspiration from the Tiber, capturing its beauty in paintings and engravings that celebrate both its serene and tumultuous nature. The river, now a tranquil part of the modern cityscape, still whispers the stories of Rome's past. It stands as a living memory of the ancient world, a symbol of both continuity and change in a city that continues to captivate the imagination of the world.